All right, no spoilers. I've not watched this yet. I was watching this and then I got to like one particular spot in this and I was like, oh, okay. I think I have to do like a reaction vid for this. I got to the part where Vaati shows the first spell. Oh man. All right, guys, let's watch this. I have not watched anything yet, so keep that in mind.
After
McLabs, thanks for the sub, dude. Welcome back. 13 months, dude. Hell yeah. All right, let's go.
After you interact with Miquella's cocoon, you're transported here to a small cave that opens up to a view of this, what they're calling the Skadu tree. And underneath this is an open plain. It's called the Spirit Grave Plains, and it's pretty huge. We had 3 hours with the game, but I only had time to explore a fraction of this. We were told that there were 2 legacy dungeons in this area, so finding those became my first objective.
You can see the dude in the distance.
I managed to beat both of the end bosses of those legacy dungeons, and I also took down a ton of notes, so I have a lot to share with you guys today. This isn't my footage, but I did the exact same thing this character is doing now, which is to go right towards the Wicker Man in the distance.
I noticed the gravestones are appearing as he's walking in the distance.
The map of this area says that the entire expanse is marred by the harrowing ravages of war, and this guy is obviously one of the vestiges of that war. We know from previous trailers that these fought on Messmer's side during his attempt to purge the Land of Shadow. You know how everyone fights the Erd Tree Sentinel as soon as they first start Elden Ring? This is a lot like that. This boss takes like no damage, and I think you'd probably be better off fighting him later on. So that's what I did. I bravely ran away towards this area that you see ahead of me. This is a crossroads. It's an intersection between Castle Ensis on the right and Bellarat Tower Settlement on the left.
Ooh,
Little did I know, though,
Damn.
the fire giant was still aggroed onto me this entire time, so he came up behind me and killed me while I was talking to these 2 NPCs.
This one looks pretty good.
Another. Treading the heels of Miquella. Then, as that woman would surely say, we are in our purposes well aligned. But understand, your kind are not forgiven. The Earth Tree
That's
is
a
my
cool
people's
armor.
enemy. By Marika long betrayed. Set aflame. I believe Miquella's apologies when he says our delivery will come, but never will I see your kind as worthy.
Okay, so that character you just heard talking, his dialogue cuts off there in this footage. However, while I wasn't able to record footage at the event, luckily I can type as fast as NPCs can talk, so here's the dialogue you just heard, and here's the other dialogue he spoke that I wrote down. I transcribed all of the dialogue from all 8 NPCs that I met, but this might be considered spoilers to a lot of people, so I'll only share it later in the video.
This castle
By the way,
looks
this
nice.
is the entrance to Bellarat, the Tower Settlement. This was the first legacy dungeon I explored. And this is where we get to talk about the new weapons. These
This armor
weapons
looks
were
cool.
a highlight of the DLC. You find so many incredible ones really early on. As a reminder, there are 8 new weapon categories being introduced in the DLC, and here you can see the character has a new throwing weapon equipped and some new magic.
Okay, so this is the part that I got to before I was like, okay, I need to do a reaction to this. Like, this fucking spell made me do like I was by myself and I was like, oh no, oh no, oh my god. It's basically range wave of darkness. Like, when I saw it, I was like, what happened if you, like, aim that thing, like, at the ground? Like, you can, like,
New
control
weapon
the
categories being introduced in the DLC, and here you can see the character has a new throwing weapon equipped and some
Like,
new
imagine
magic.
if you shoot that here, like, you could control where the wave of darkness happens.
Now the character switches
That's
weapons to
dirty.
equip the Dryleaf arts, a new type.
One sec. I'm not gonna stop.
There
I'm
are
gonna stop it afterward. Like, I'm only gonna stop it here. Like, I'm gonna watch the whole thing, but I just want to see it again.
8 new weapon categories being introduced in the DLC, and here you can see the character has a new throwing weapon equipped and some new magic. Now the
Yeah,
character
boy.
switches weapons to equip the Dryleaf arts, a new type of hand-to-hand combat.
Okay. I've not seen this yet. It does feel like Fist a little bit,
So
but
yeah,
with
we're
more
getting
recovery.
8 new weapon types. But before today, we only knew the names of 5 of these new weapon types.
Oh,
But
this
now
armor looks
all
nice.
8 have been revealed. The last 3 weapon types are perfume bottles, light greatswords, and beast claws. You're about to see the beast claws.
Oh my god, this is gonna be cursed as well. Oh my, what the actual fuck? What the fuck is that? Oh no. Bro.
Even with these new weapons, this rooftop section was difficult. I actually got knocked off by these birds and I fell down here to a sort of sewer filled with these fly creatures that you can see off to the left. I have some lore to share on these, and I think it relates to them. One of the talismans I found was called the Ailment Talisman, and it reads, "When the weak were infected with the dreaded fly sickness, they perished well before the metamorphosis could take hold. Oddly, those who cared for the infected and made sure they were given a proper burial were never afflicted themselves." Also, this is where you get to see one of the new perfumer weapons.
Human weapons. Oh no. Not
By the way,
again.
again, the place we're exploring is called Bellarat Tower Settlement. From a distance you can see this enormous tower coming out from the settlement, and clearly the settlement was built around it.
Bro, like, all these new weapons are just like fucking, you know, like gimmicks. It's not like, oh, here's a new, like, cool new type of sword that, you know, you swing with a melee moveset. It's no, like, look at these things that do all these explosions.
So, what is this tower? Well, I found an item in this area called the Bone Bow, which imbues arrows with vengeful spirits, and it explains how the tower was once a place for ancient hexing arts. Maybe that explains why we're fighting so many
Cool dagger.
spirits in this area. But I think this tower is hiding a huge secret, because in front of the tower I found a note that explains where this tower leads. Apparently it leads to the Gate of Divinity,
Oh
which
no! No! No!
leads. Apparently it leads to the Gate of Divinity, which I leads. Apparently it leads to the Gate of Divinity, which I think could explain.
Man, this better do no fucking damage.
Apparently it leads to the Gate of Divinity, which I think could explain the very nature.
Bro, did you see that?
To the Gate of Divinity, which I think could explain
Boom.
the very
Like, it does too.
leads to the Gate of Divinity, which I think could explain the very nature of the lands between.
It looks like the power stance curve sword running attack, but they just removed the weapon, they kept the animation, and then they just made it with some explosions. Steady Shell, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime resub, man.
Of Divinity, which I think could explain the very nature of the lands between, as well as everything we saw with Marika in the previous trailer. So the tower is our objective, but to get there first we have to defeat the divine beast that guards it. This is the divine beast, dancing lion, and it's tough. They said this was the easier boss of the two, but I disagree. I had a way harder time with this one, and it took me 3 or 4 attempts to defeat.
Is that a new twin blade? I think it is, right?
Briefly
Definitely a
here,
new
we see the
Astro
player use a new weapon, a thrusting shield, but there are some attacks you can't block against.
Well, we don't get to see it.
The remembrance of the dancing lion tells us that when the Impaler's army assailed the tower, the ritual of the lion dance was turned towards martial ends, its divinity, its fury, its light-footed beauty. And according to a charm I found, divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. After defeating the divine beast, I went across that bridge in the distance, and I cleared the second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensus. There's no footage I can show of that, but afterwards I did actually come here and I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also this new multi-shot.
This is going to be so annoying. Oh my god. Like, guys, like, you all know, like, what happens with the, with that one, like, spell, like, that one, like, sorcery spell, where you just cast something that hovers in the air, and then it just fires after a certain amount of time, and it just forces you to wait and wait and wait and wait.
I did actually come here and I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about
like
to
the
show
same
off
thing.
the new reverse hand swords, and also this new
Except the explosion is hella big.
multi-shot crossbow.
I kind of like the crossbow, though. Oh, and he has the reverse grip curve swords. Let me rewatch that.
Come here and I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also this new multi-shot crossbow.
Wait, he ate something,
And
though.
I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also
Like, he just ate something. I don't know what he ate. I wonder what type of buff this is.
this player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also this new multi-shot crossbow.
Damn. Oh, wow. That's brutal. And the Corvian, too? This sword looks strong, actually, like... Damn! That's a lot of forward momentum.
So this player is about to make their way into a nearby dungeon. Now, I only had time to clear 2 overworld dungeons.
Wait, you determine when it explodes? Wait.
I noticed
Sorry about that.
and I cleared the second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensus.
Let's back up a little bit.
The second legacy dungeon,
Am I in the right spot? Oh, yeah.
of
I'm
which
too far.
storms are the pinnacle. After defeating the divine beast, I went across that bridge in the distance, and I cleared the second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensus. There's no footage I can show of that, but afterwards I did actually come here and I noticed these guys fighting. This player is about to show off the new reverse hand swords, and also this new multi-shot
Do you really
crossbow.
determine when it explodes? Sorry. Moveset looks similar to what we already have. This looks nice. I like these enemies
So this
too.
player is about to make their way into a nearby dungeon. Now, I only had time to clear 2 overworld dungeons, but the 2 I did find were extremely unique. You can tell that they put a lot of effort into the dungeon designs, that I found, at least. And
Nice.
luckily, this player is going into one of the dungeons that I actually found. It's called the Ruined Lava Forge Intake.
Nice.
You might recognize it from a previous trailer. It's this one, with the long intake pipe you can use as a bridge. That phantom right there says, "By grace, if I ever see another rock, I shall find it, of this I have no doubt. The altar of the forge cannot be far." The altar of the forge he's looking for is at the end of the dungeon. It's this
Gangsters hold their curved sword backward.
far. The altar of the forge he's looking for is at the end of the dungeon. It's this thing from this screenshot. Interestingly, there's no boss in this dungeon that I could find, but instead I looted the Anvil Hammer, one of the treasures of the ruined forges. This next clip shows off the last new weapon category we haven't yet seen, the Light Greatsword class.
Wait.
This Light Greatsword in particular is called Milady.
What? What? A light greatsword?
Okay, these new weapons are really something. I guess light greatswords basically then are weapons with the length of a greatsword, but with an elegant moveset that
The length of the greatsword, but the speed of a straight sword. Brilliant idea.
makes use of how light the
Wait.
length of a greatsword, but with an elegant moveset that makes use of how light the weapon is.
Would be nice to know like how many attacks are actually thrown there, because like there's so many like swings that are going on that it's kind of confusing.
With an elegant moveset that makes use of how light the weapon is.
Like it's hard to tell if it's good or bad, because like if it's good, like okay, like a lot of these are gonna stun. If it's bad, it's not gonna stun and it's gonna leave you with a ton of recovery. Like it's hard to tell. Yeah, like every move that we've seen so far is like very over the top.
How light the weapon is. Okay, so weirdly, this clip and all of the remaining footage that I have to show you is of places that I'm almost certain we couldn't access in our preview build of the game. I think these places exist if you progress past the second legacy dungeon in this starting area, but they were watching very carefully to make sure we didn't do that. I don't think we could get to these places, but regardless, this is probably a good point for us to transition into what will be the second part of this video, where from this point on, I'm going to go into extreme detail on everything I experienced, even stuff that I can't show. So that means every item description, every NPC I met, and I'm also going to talk about what's actually inside that second legacy dungeon, which is called Castle Ensus. Honestly, I'd only really recommend watching this point onwards if you're extremely lore hungry and you just really want to know everything you can about the story before you play. So pause the video, think about whether this is
I'm pausing the video. We're thinking about it. I am the lore master. After all.
for you, because my goal on this channel is to enhance your
Ooh, look at that. Look at that. That's a cool armor.
Pause the video, think about whether this is for you, because my goal on this channel is to enhance your enjoyment of these games.
That helmet looks sick.
And if you think going in blind or blinder would enhance your experience, please do that.
This map
With
looks
that
sick.
said, let's start at the very beginning, at Miquella's cocoon. So, when you first arrive at Mogwin Palace to enter the DLC, someone is already there before
These
you.
armors have
Her
20
name
points
is
combined.
Leda, the
True.
Needle Knight. I won't narrate all her dialogue, but this is what I've transcribed, so feel free to pause the video and read all of that. But basically, she's the character who has talked a few times already in previous trailers, and you might have seen her recently in this incredible concept art that they put out. Basically, Leda is the de facto leader of Miquella's band of faithful followers that seem to be tracking him throughout the DLC. Now, you touch Miquella's cocoon, and you're instantly transported to this cave. There was no cutscene for us, but I wonder if that's because maybe they already activated the cutscene when they were setting up this build for us to play. Regardless, you head out into this plain that's full of graves and what's called spirit grave grass. The Skadu tree looks over it all, and we know the name of this tree from a Shadow Realm rune, which is basically just a consumable rune that says the Skadu tree is the shadow of the Erd tree. No wonder Grace shines ever so brilliantly. So apparently golden remnants of grace are still bestowed upon those who fall in the realm of shadow. And there's another item that talks about it. It's a Skadu tree fragment, which says, "It is said that when the Skadu tree crumbles from its core, that it will scatter across the entire realm of shadow. The people of the Erd tree collect the splinters and use them in prayer." The icon for the Skadu tree fragment looked just like that black burnt Erd tree, but with the golden sort of syrup inside. And these fragments were important because these are the fragments that give you a bit of a damage boost or a damage reduction exclusively when you're within the Shadow Realm, and I think they're meant to really motivate you to explore the open world, because I found the vast majority of these in the open world. I didn't find any, I don't think, in a legacy dungeon.
Ooh.
So they're really meant to motivate your exploration.
I like
Another
the
item that's
vegetation.
similar to these that you also hand in at a site of grace are revered spirit ashes. Now, these are an item that when handed in bolster both your summoned spirits and Torrent's ability to deal and negate damage.
You're supposed
Obviously,
to put your
in
arm
Torrent's
in
case,
there.
it just reduces the damage you take. But again, these have no influence outside the Land of Shadow. And speaking of summoned spirits, I found 3 in the DLC, and each of them had really good lore associated with them. The ash I used the most were the Finger Creeper ashes. Finally, we get lore on the Finger Creepers. I used this in my Lion Dancer fight. It actually came in really clutch because I was about to die, but then the Finger Creeper used an AoE heal and got me through the fight, and I think that's the fight I ended up winning on. The other Spirit Ash that I think was the strongest was called Andreas Black Knight Commander. And here's the description for that one.
Huge shield.
I think if you pause and read that description, I think that might be the most lore-significant description that I wrote
It
down
looks like a door,
out
right?
of my entire play session. But I don't have too much time to speculate on this video. I will just say it's very interesting that it says Messmer fled from the Erd Tree. Did he assault or burn the Erd Tree, maybe? The summon is very strong, it uses a lot of FP, and it looks obviously just like the Black Knight commanders that I'm showing in these screenshots. The third and final Spirit Ash I found were the Gravebird Spirit Ashes. Now, the Gravebirds are this enemy that you can see in the footage. There were also a lot of them sort of sitting on top of trees to the left here in this scene. You can't see them, but they were guarding a small mausoleum here. And inside this mausoleum, there was a fairly difficult NPC boss that uses the crossbow. He's basically this NPC that we saw in a previous trailer, except in phantom form. He didn't drop the crossbow when I defeated him, but he did drop his greatsword and his armor, which describes him as a Knight of the Solitary Jail. Next,
Nice.
the biggest revelation in the DLC, bar none, is that the worms, I can confirm, are friendly. Until they're not. If you hit them, well, you'll see. Anyway, when you first enter the DLC, you know, which direction you set off in is such a defining moment, but I think most people will eventually find their way to these crosses of Miquella that have been left behind, partly because it's very close to the fire giant, which I think also draws your attention, but also these crosses just stand out from such a distance, and I think that is their purpose. They don't actually do anything except give you some lore. When you touch the cross, it says carved words coalesce, and the words at most of them said something like, I abandon here the first of the flesh of my body. Clearly these are left behind by Miquella, and clearly his whole entourage are following these crosses as well. So you often find NPCs here. This NPC at the back there is named Freya. Basically, she used to be one of Radahn's followers, but now she follows Miquella instead, and she recommends that you talk to who she calls her dour little friend. And if you talk to him, he does give you a map of the cross's whereabouts, which is basically like a little hand-drawn map that tells you about 3 nearby crosses that are, and I quote, Miquella's footprints. So that's Freya. But the man you talk to for the map, I think, is called Hornsent, but I'm not sure if that's his name or if Hornsent are just a race of beings instead. Later, we learn that the Lion Dancer is essentially sent from the heavens, and since it has horns, I speculate that the horned race that once occupied Belurat Tower Settlement might be called the Hornsent. The word is actually referenced as well in some items.
Yeah, alright, let's
I was fortunate.
Is that this one? Yeah, I mean, it must be.
I was fortunate enough to play the first few hours of the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, and needless to say, there is lots of yapping to be done. I'm not going to go over everything today, I'm just going to cover the gameplay elements like the new upgrade system, new weapons, spells, talismans, and other small changes. So I'm not going to talk about anything story related, not going to talk about the bosses, level design. I'll make another video talking about those things tomorrow, and also anything that I just forgot to add in this video, or if I find out new information, I'll make some Twitter posts about them. Yeah, I just made a new account recently. Surely only intelligent conversations take place there. Now, just for some more additional context, we only had an area that was roughly half the size of Limgrave to explore, and we only had 3 hours to play. So there is going to be stuff that I might have missed. I also wasn't allowed to talk to any other content creators to show.
Keep in mind, like, if you look at all of this, there's barely any cover, like, anywhere. There's, like, one thing, like, here and there, and everything else, like, all these gravestones are, like, just visuals. There's no cover in there.
Information, so anything in this video that you see is just directly from me. Well, except of the gameplay itself, I wasn't actually allowed to save my own. Bandai Namco provided me with about 13 minutes of just like random gameplay, which doesn't really show much, so I am going to be doing a lot of describing. Now we're going to start off talking about the new upgrading or leveling system. If you did not know already, there is going to be a new way to level up your character via some buffs that is specific to the DLC location. This is made so players...
Wait, via some buffs? Is it like during the fight type of buff?
Don't just run from boss. There's some buffs that is specific to the DLC location. This is made so players don't just run from boss to boss and then steamroll the entire game. Now this buff is called Shadow Realm Blessing. It is upgraded similar to how you upgrade your healing flask. You grab items that are scattered throughout the world. They are in somewhat obvious locations, and you can consume these at the Site of Grace to give yourself a buff. Now from my testing, this is a 5% damage increase, and I believe a +3 to all of your damage negation stats.
Okay. Okay, 5% to all damage increase, +3 damage negation, or 8% damage negation. So you take a little bit less, and you do a little bit more. I wonder how that's going to translate in PvP.
I didn't actually test out the damage negation thoroughly, so I'm not sure if it's +3 or like an 8%.
Or if it's going to be affected at all.
Increase, but it is going to be somewhat of a significant amount for every single buff. Now this buff is only applicable to the Lands of Shadows, not the Lands Between, which is the base game. You can also tell the buff is active because all of your stats in the menu will be highlighted in yellow. Now you might think that 5% isn't that much, but in my 3 hours of playing,
it's a lot. 5% is massive.
I did manage to grab enough items to boost my Shadow Realm Blessing 3 times. Now, kind of similar to Golden Seeds, you're going to need multiple of this item. The more that you actually upgrade it, you only need 1 the first time, but then you're going to need 2 for the second, 2 for the third, and then 3 for the fourth. And yes, every buff does give that same 5% damage boost.
Damn.
Now, I'm not sure what the maximum amount actually is, but my guess is that you probably can boost it up to 10 times. And also this...
Jesus, dude, like... You basically, like, do fucking double damage and take twice as less. That's insane.
This buff is not reversible. Now there is going to be another item.
If it affects PvP, it make it better, make people more tanky. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If it's like plus 5% to offense and then plus 8% to defense, like we take like basically 3% less damage every time we crank that up. That would be nice.
To boost your Spirit Ashes too, it still falls under Shadow Realm Blessing, but it requires different items, so you don't have to worry about picking and choosing between your Spirit Ashes or yourself. They're going to be separate. Now these items are also pretty easy to acquire. One of them was actually dropped off like a random enemy in like the hallway of a legacy dungeon. So do also keep in mind that it can drop off enemies too. Now I don't know the amounts of which they do get buffed by. I'm going to assume that's going to be very similar to our buff. But yeah, I didn't really test it out because I didn't really use any Spirit Ashes at all. I was busy testing like basically everything else. Like the weapons, there is going to be roughly 100 new weapons.
Second day, thanks to the Twitch Prime resub for 1 year. Thank you so much.
In Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, obviously, I didn't have access to that many. They gave me like 10 weapons right at the beginning, and I found like another 5. Also, I am pretty sure that I found all 8 of the new weapon classes. I read 8 different categories, so I'm gonna just go with it. But confirmed, we have light greatswords.
Yeah, light greatswords, which is very strange.
Great katanas, martial arts weapons, bear claws. Those two actually might fall into the same category. Duelist shields, perfume bottles, backhand blades, and throwable weapons. Now first...
Dude, all of these are, like, maybe except, like, Great Katana, even Light Greatsword, they seem pretty gimmicky. Like, Great Katana might actually be the only weapon in there that's, like, not gimmicky.
First things first, I want to talk about the Light Greatswords. The weapon you see on screen right now is called Milady. Now, this weapon class is obviously going to be an in-between of the Greatsword and the Straightsword, and their moveset is the smoothest moveset I have seen in any FromSoft game. This class is probably the highlight of all the weapons. Its light attack is a mix-up of pokes and swipes. The heavy is a bunch of swipes. The Ash of War is specific to the light greatswords. Is a cool stance to where you can either lunge or get off a flurry swiping attack, but the best part of the weapon is going to be the weapon combos. This guard counter you see on screen right now isn't actually a 3-hit combo. It's just a 2-hit combo, but the light attack follows flawlessly with the moveset that it just looks like the exact same attack. And the
Oh, okay, so the light attack is 1 attack. That's good. That's what I wanted to know.
light attack follows flawlessly with the moveset that it just looks like the exact same attack. And the same as this combo right here. It's a heavy attack double swipe that has the sword finish overhead, and then when you click the light attack, it just continues the combo. And this same thing can also be done with a running attack, and it's just buttery smooth. It basically feels exactly how it looks. Now, there is also a power stancing light greatsword weapon that I'm not going to disclose the name of for spoiler reasons, but I can talk about it in tomorrow's video. But this power stance that I'm not going to disclose how it looks. Now, there is also a power stancing light greatsword weapon that I'm not going to disclose.
Power stancing light greatsword, dude.
Disclose the name of for spoiler. There is also a power stancing light greatsword weapon that I'm not going to disclose the name of for spoiler reasons, but I can talk about it in tomorrow's video. But this power stance combo does have the same types of combo potential, but it doesn't have both weapons swinging at the same time. And typically, dual wielding weapons that hit at the same time are just better. So for me, if I'm using the light greatswords, I'm probably going to shift towards more just two-handing the weapon. But this power stancing weapon in particular is actually an int faith weapon, very similar to the sword of. But this power stancing weapon in particular is actually an int faith weapon.
Okay, so no one's gonna use it. Got it.
Very similar to the sword of Night and Flame. It gets split fire and magic damage, and its skill is a stance to where you can either summon a fire tornado or shoot out these like magic type of wave attacks. It is a very cool weapon. It doesn't perform as well as a sword of Night and Flame in my opinion, but it is more fun. Now, the next weapon I want to cover is the Great Katana. The weapon is called Great Katana, and as is the weapon category. Unfortunately, there isn't a gameplay for me to share, but the closest thing that I can really compare it to is the Kensei from For Honor. You get a mix-up of these poking attacks and these half downward chops. Your running and heavy attacks also do get pokes too. They do get bleed, and they do get a unique Ash of War option that is also a stance to where you can either do a big overhead swipe or a flurry of overhead swipes. They're going to be pretty similar to curved greatswords in terms of damage and speeds. They're all going to do slashing damage as well, although they do get less poise damage, but some of their poking attacks can come out pretty
Wait, they get less poise damage. What are we talking about here?
Fast. And unfortunately, I didn't actually find a second one to test out the power stancing combo. The martial arts weapons and the bear claws, I think are gonna fall under the same category, even though
Bro, this fucking guy is all over the screen, dude. What is going on?
The martial arts weapons and the bear claws, I think are gonna fall under the same category, even though the category
Bro, how do you hit that? Like, just
arts
just
weapons and
watch
the
that.
bear claws, I think are gonna fall under the same category, even though the
Bro, where's my hitbox, bro? How do I hit this thing?
category names was actually different, but they do perform very similar. This weapon you see on screen is called the Dry Leaf, and this weapon you see, I do not recognize. It kind of looks similar to like the bear claws I got to test, but like a different color. So yeah, forgive me for not remembering. I played it like 2 weeks ago, and this gameplay was sent to me like a couple of days ago. But the way I like to categorize these weapons is that the Dry Leaf is kind of like a dexterity-based fist weapon, and the
Oh, dude, dexterity-based fist weapon. That's what I'm talking about.
categorize these weapons is that the Dry Leaf is kind of like a dexterity-based fist weapon, and the bear claws are kind of like a strength-based claw weapon, because they
Okay.
also do get bleed as well. And in my
Nice.
honest and humble opinion, they're more fun than fists and claws, but they perform worse. The main reason is that
Yeah, because they have like way too many attacks.
they're more fun than fists and claws, but they
Also, recovery seems like insanely long there. I don't know if it's because they're chaining attacks together, but the recovery looks fucking brutal.
and in
Like
my honest
useless
and
brutal.
humble opinion, they're more fun than fists and claws, but they perform worse. The main reason is that none of their attacks have the weapon hit at the exact same time, which when dual wielding,
Well, that doesn't matter. Like Kestis and Starfist, they don't hit at the same time, but when the attack is that fast, if the last hit stuns, it's still pretty strong.
none of their attacks have the weapon hit
gonna
at the exact same
depend on the
time,
weapon.
which when dual wielding, this is just going to be better like almost always. It means you're just maximizing your damage in like a little amount of time possible.
Like what he's saying is true for most weapons, but it's not true for fists. For fists, it's very dangerous, the fact that they don't hit at the same time, because you're almost guaranteed to always get chip damage. And because the second attack comes out fairly fast on like a running attack, well, you're still gonna hit it and stun with that last part of the running attack. So it's very dangerous. It's like Twin Blade. Like Twin Blade, like there's 2 attacks, one that hits at the start and the other one afterward. So you're basically always guaranteeing some chip. If it's the same thing here with these fist-like weapons, well, it's gonna be good. But what I'm wondering, it's like I'm looking at all these attacks, right? And like I'm seeing some
mean, like a
long
couple-
animations. I don't know if they're like chaining attacks together. They're like pressing R1, R2, R1, or whatever. But
days
it
ago-
looks like there's a lot going on in terms of like recovery and a lot of moves.
But the way I like to categorize these weapons is that the Dry Leaf is kind of like a dexterity-based fist weapon, and the bear claws are kind of like a strength-based claw weapon, because they also do get bleed as well. And in my honest and humble opinion, they're more fun than fists and claws, but they perform worse. The main reason is that none of their attacks have the weapon hit at the exact same time, which when dual wielding, this is just going to be better like almost always. It means you're just maximizing your damage in like a little amount of time possible. Now this flurry attack kick that you see is going to be an Ash of War, does get some nice amount of hype
Nice. An Ash of War. Nice.
possible. Now this flurry attack kick that you see is going to be an Ash of War, does get some nice amount of hype Rama, but it is a longer animation.
Some high Rama. Let's get it. Some high Rama. Thank you, YouTube.
Kick that you see is going to be an Ash of War, does get some nice amount of hype Rama, but it is a longer animation, so it might be a bit more situational. There is a cool skill for the bear claws that isn't shown, but it is a very short range single swiping attack that does get a cool animation and have high stance damage. Now one thing we didn't actually have access to was the multi-hit talismans, and honestly just not much time, so I couldn't really test the maximum potential of these weapons. I do see these being very viable options, but it is hard to beat out weapons like the Starfist or the Raptor Talons.
Yeah.
The backhanded blades, the weapon that you're seeing on screen right now is called something, I forgot the name, but they are power stancing types of weapons that are very comparable to curve swords, and probably just going to be outclassed by power stance curve swords, because the power stance curve swords swing both weapons at the same time, and their running attacks and jumping attacks hit so many times that it results in very broken builds. But this thing looks cooler, and that's all that matters. But these weapons do have a couple of benefits over power stance curve swords. One, it means you just have to level up one weapon to be able to dual wield. Just in general, normally when you have the power stance or dual wield, you have to upgrade to 2 different weapons. And with a dual wielding weapon in itself, you do get access to like running heavy and running light attacks, jumping heavy and jumping light attacks, and also just power stance charged heavy attacks too. which the running heavy attack is very comparable to curved swords and it might just end up doing more damage. And the charged heavy attack is actually really good. And overall, I feel like it does do more stance damage than the curved swords, especially with that Ash of War that you see here.
More stance damage than the curved sword. Well, now the curved sword's stun in one hit. Also, the fact that this is like a medium type weapon. I wonder if they actually got these people to play on a different patch too for this build, you know? Like, I wonder if they're actually on a different patch so that like their poise values are like different from what we got. It could be.
Overall, I feel like it does do more stance damage than the curved swords, especially with that.
Because I would highly doubt that, unless he's talking about an Ash of War in particular, I would highly doubt that the weapons themselves don't fall in line with the rest of the medium type weapons, because the way poise is separated here in Elden Ring right now, it's like pretty much all medium type weapon, like straight sword, curved swords, katanas, like spears, they all do the same amount of poise damage for the most part, like unless there's like multiple hit attacks, but it's really all the same. So like this is a pretty similar like weapon. And so you'd assume it probably does along the same as the other ones, but maybe they actually played on a different patch, because the DLC is probably going to be played on a different patch. So maybe they did touch the poise values, and maybe it's not going to be true anymore once we get our hands on the DLC though.
That Ash of War that you see here, it is a very nice lunge for not much FP, but it is somewhat harder to control. The duelist shields are something for not
Although
much.
keep in mind, like this weapon, like that we see, like the reverse grip curved sword, and that attack right there, this is basically like a recycled Corvian great knife animation, right? It's basically like the Corvian attack from Dark Souls 3, and the Corvian attack from Dark Souls 3 did massive, like it basically broke like all light armor, like a massive poise damage. So if he's talking about that, then yes, this would probably do a lot of poise damage, that particular attack. Kind of like Impaling Thrust, right?
And the charged heavy attack is actually really good. And overall, I feel like it does do more stance damage than the curved swords, especially with that Ash of War that you see here. It is a very nice lunge for not much FP, but it is somewhat harder to control. The duelist shields are something I did not test out much. I probably killed like 3 enemies with them and then took them off. They like literally feel like playing with a regular shield, but just with a couple of extra light attacks. The range is obviously going to be their biggest downside. One thing that
I don't know, I have a feeling that he's like he says it's just a shield with a few light attacks, like you know, press the doubt.
3 enemies with them and then took them off. They like literally feel like playing with a regular shield, but just with a couple of extra light attacks. The range is obviously going to be their biggest downside. One thing that I actually didn't test that I wish I did is if they get critical attacks or not. I hope they do get critical attacks, because if they didn't, that would be kind of silly. The perfume bottles are now going to be weapons in this game via the DLC. Their light and heavy attacks do these cool projectiles, and no, they do not consume any FP. Now, I didn't have time.
What? They didn't consume any FP? You can just spam that shit infinitely? What?
Heavy attacks do these cool projectiles, and no, they do not consume any FP. Now, I didn't have time to test their max potential, and they also didn't give us the perfume talisman to see if it actually helps boost the damage. I also didn't find a second one to test the power stancing combo, but
I mean, it is 100% going to do more damage with the perfume talisman. Let's be fucking honest here. Like, of course it is. Of course.
the weapon I did test was called the Fire Spark Bottle, and I didn't really like it. The range was not that good, the moveset was pretty slow, doesn't really stagger those larger types of enemies like Omens or Knights. The stance
doesn't stagger large type of enemies is irrelevant to us. What we care about is if it does 133 poise damage, right?
damage doesn't seem good enough either, but once again, I didn't have enough time to make a build around it, so it is definitely going to be better than what I'm making it out to be. There are going to be a bunch of new throwable weapons in Shadow of the Erdtree. There is one that I played with that does fall under the new weapon class. That is called the Smith Script Dagger. I might be wrong on that name. It's definitely
the Smith Script Dagger. Well, we already have the Script Dagger that kills in one hit. Well, the Smith Script Dagger is going to be interesting.
Smith something. My memory is like a little hazy. But these are basically a way to have projectiles with your light and heavy attack that do respectable damage, and they don't consume any FP. You can fully charge the heavy attacks for some better stance damage, but don't expect much. And no, the character we used did not have the arrow reach or sting talisman, so I don't know if either of those things work with this. Now these should definitely be used at a distance because at point blank range, their damage, range, and stance damage is going to be outclassed by most other melee weapons.
Man, these daggers, like, I can just picture myself invading and having, like, 2 phantoms, like, spamming these daggers at me. Like, it's going to be so fucking annoying. I can just, like, visualize it.
Blank range, their damage, range, and stance damage is going to be outclassed by most other melee weapons, but it is going to be a very nice projectile-based option that you don't have to spec into Faith or Intelligence for, and it probably is going to be
a nice projectile where you don't have to spend points into neither Fate or Intelligence. As if we don't have to deal with enough projectiles.
best paired alongside some status effects types of builds, because yeah, this weapon can be infused. Now there are going to be a bunch of other Smith script weapons that don't fall under the throwable weapons class, but they do get projectile heavy attacks.
Dude, everything has fucking projectiles now. Axe, spear, great hammer.
There is an axe of what you see on screen right now. There is a great hammer and there also is a spear. The spear is very similar to like Spectral Lance, Ash of War, or the Follower's Javelin from Dark Souls 3. The Great Hammer does this cool spin to win and throw. It kind of looks like from like the hammer throwing sport. Now they obviously don't consume any FP. They do work the Axe Talisman and the Spiked Cracks tier. They can proc status effects, but they do typically have longer animations and don't do as much stance damage as other weapons in their class. So if you're going to be using the Great Hammer and expecting to melt enemies' stance bar at a distance, don't. Now, there were a bunch of other cool weapons I came across when playing the DLC.
I wonder what the like, is it like, I'm not sure I got that right. Is it like a throwable great hammer, or is it like like one or a few attacks where this great hammer has like throwing attacks, or like every attack that this great hammer has is basically you throw the hammer?
See, one was called the Fire Knight's Greatsword. You guys are going to kick out of this one. This is basically a colossal sword that has a very similar design to the Flamboge. It doesn't get bleed. It can be infused. It gets the Godslayer's Greatsword light attack combo. Ooh. And the Zweihander heavy poking attack.
Okay.
Yep. There is also another colossal sword called the Moon Irithyll Sword. Basically identical design to the Troll's Night Sword, but this one actually comes with Great Blade Phalanx as a skill. Don't know why they didn't actually include Great Blade Phalanx to the Troll's Night Sword, but thankfully we have it now. Now the skill isn't actually called Great Blade Phalanx, had some kind of funky name that I forgot what it was like Super Phalanx or some shit. And
fucking soul mats, man. They put soul mats everywhere.
No, I didn't actually test out the amount of stance damage that it actually does do. Obviously, Carrion Phalanx does like a lot of stance damage, so hopefully this one probably just does a bit more. But it is going to be a unique skill that is specific for the Moon Irithyll Sword. Also, I did test out a new bow called the Bone Bow, and I did have a unique skill called Rancor Shot, and this skill is basically like the Barrage skill, but it actually has a little bit of tracking. And
what about great bows,
to get into all of the new spells in Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, unfortunately, the gameplay doesn't really have many spells showcased. There's only like 2, and I played with about 10 of them. And
honestly, they already look cancer, especially this one. This one, low-key, looks very, very strong. Like, for invasions, you basically get Wave of Darkness at a distance, like projected anywhere.
All of the new spells in Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, unfortunately,
unless it needs to hit a target in order to trigger. If that's the case, then it might be useless. If that's the case, we'll see. But if you can like just shoot it at a wall and then it starts its like explosion patterns like at the wall, then it's gonna be super strong.
The gameplay doesn't really have many spells showcased. There's only like 2, and I played with about 10 of them. And honestly, most of these spells that I played with kind of just suck. Hopefully they can get buffed. But yeah, even with like really high level builds with all like the buffs in the world, some of these just perform terribly. But to start off with the incantations.
Good. Fucking good. Don't say they buff him. Just leave him like that.
And the absolute best spell, S tier spell, Night Lightning Spear. There is no gameplay for this, but basically how this works, for 35 FP, you basically do this Lightning Spear attack. It's like identical to Lightning Spear, but alongside this Lightning Spear, it actually shoots out 4 other lightning projectile attacks, kind of similar to like a homing soul mass type of thing, or like
God fucking damn it, man. All these fucking projectiles.
Like a phalanx attack. There'll be 4 other projectiles that surrounds the player, and it'll just all track towards the enemy, and pretty quickly as well. And not only does this do like amazing damage, but those 4 projectile attacks are guaranteed. Even if you get staggered out of like the initial lightning spear, those 4 attacks will still come out. The skill can be fully
Great.
charged, and best of all yet, this thing does roughly 30 stance damage. It's like 25 to 30 stance damage. Obviously, I couldn't get the exact number. I was just testing it out on enemies of which I knew their poise value, which if you don't know how much 30 stance damage is, that's basically twice the amount of Stone of Garank. And it does it in a much quicker projectile attack. That does insane damage. Next spell I want to talk about is Pest Threads Spears. This is going to be just like a bigger version of Pest Threads. Kind of shoots out these like 2 spears in like a V-shape attack. I'll try and put something on screen to help you visualize it. Now this is going to do more damage.
Low-key, I'm sure they like at the studio they're like reusing some of the Armored Core stuff. I mean, why not?
Than Pest Threads, but against those larger types of bosses where Pest Threads really excels, it's probably not going to do as well because Pest Threads does get more aggressive tracking, meaning that I can actually hit those enemies more times. Pest Threads Spears still get some pretty decent tracking, so against those larger enemies, I did test that out against like the Limgrave Dragon. It can actually hit him multiple times. But the benefit of Pest Thread Spears is that it actually does really good damage against those smaller enemies too, where Pest Threads does not. So it is going to have more versatility. It also can be fully charged, and it does consume 28 FP, which can be on the higher end, but it does seem like a pretty decent spell. Now, the worst thing about Pest Thread Spears is that it implies the existence of like a very large Kindred of Rot. I don't like that idea. There is going to be another healing spell called Minor Erdtree, which is this identical to Melena's spell, where she summons that tree, has a bunch of health regen.
So basically a spell that's like Holy Ground.
Now this spell has ridiculously high requirements. I think it was like 70 faith, does cost 30 FP, but it is going to be like the warmth equivalent from the previous games, and does do like a little bit of health regen in a nice
Oh, nice. If it's like warmed, it's gonna be nice.
AoE. Now the next spell is this bear roaring attack. I forget the actual name, but this one,
roar.
I'm not really too sure what it does. I kind of ran out of time. I didn't really get to thoroughly test it.
I mean, it's pretty clear what it does. It roars twice so that you get frame trap between the 2 roars, or it's very, very tight and you have to roll at the exact right time to be able to dodge both of the roars.
But the damage of this thing is not that good. It can be fully charged.
If it's not that good, you're probably frame trap.
It does like stun lock enemies pretty nicely. I think it does have like a secondary effect to it. I think I remember reading the description of it and it probably said something like boosting the potency of certain spells. My mind might be playing tricks on me. The whole like experience was like somewhat of a blur. I didn't write down everything because there was so much stuff to keep track of. I did not notice that it actually debuffs the enemy like Grail's Roar because typically there would be like a visual indicator on the enemy, but I didn't really notice the buff on my character, but there probably will be one. So yeah, sorry for not really like testing this one out thoroughly. There is going to be a spell called Wrath from Afar, which one, I hate the name because this spell is basically like Wrath of the Gods, but you can just shoot it at a distance.
God fucking damn it, man. Why? Why?
I hate the name because this spell is basically like Wrath of the Gods, but you can just shoot it at a distance, hence Wrath from Afar. Could have been a bit more creative than that one, but that's okay. But yeah, this spell is basically going to be Emit Force from the previous games, but just
okay, if it's like Emit Force, it's not too bad.
just a holy based version. The damage is not going to be that good, but it does like send enemies flying. And
okay, we're good. We're still
it can
good.
knock them backwards, which might
Well, I don't know if we're still good. Like, I don't know what it's gonna be like if we have to fight multiple people casting that shit. But we're gonna have to see there.
be pretty good at ledge killing in invasions, which there are going to be plenty of like ledge killing opportunities in the DLC, of which I did notice.
Nice, that's good. Like, the new maps is really what I'm most excited about, really. Like, all these new maps are gonna be great to play in. It's gonna be a nice change of pace, too.
The spell can be fully charged and it does only consume 18 FP. Divine Bird Feathers is another spell that exists. This spell is basically going to be like a holy version of Fire Surge, but actually does fire out a bunch of these like feathers in like a horizontal spread. They're basically like crucible feathers type of thing. But yeah, just like Fire Surge, this thing does terrible damage. It is just not good or viable at all. Might be probably more useful to like clean up kills in PvP, but it does
Really, cleanup kills it. Because Fire Surge in this game is not that great, right? But in Dark Souls 3, Fire Surge is straight up broken. So hopefully they're not bringing the Fire Surge from Dark Souls 3 back, right? Under a new coat of paint.
does have like a longer casting animation, and the FP cost can be
Okay, so if it has a longer cast animation, we're fine. We're good.
clean up kills in PvP, but it does have like a longer casting animation, and the FP cost can be pretty high if you keep holding onto the trigger. The last incantation I want to talk about is Aspect of the Crucible Bloom. Now this spell is identical to like the Miranda Prayer tool that you actually see in the game. Well, it's not, you don't really see it in the game because it's cut content.
Okay, I was about to say, like, I've never seen that before.
Miranda prayer tool that you actually see in the game. Well, it's not, you don't really see it in the game because it's cut content, but it just works identical to this. It's the exact same animation, same speed. The only difference is that like aspect of the Crucible Bloom does summon like a flower on your chest. But yeah, this spell is just not that good because as you can see, the hit detection is terrible. It takes a long time for those projectiles to come out. You don't get any hyper armor. Now, thankfully, your damage is going to be better than what you get with the tools. And it does only consume 20 FP. So maybe against those enemies that like just don't move at all and are very large, it might end up doing some nice amounts of damage, but I think there are plenty of other spells in the game that could just also do this much more efficiently. Now, getting into the sorceries, the best one here is going to be Gravitational Missile. Thankfully, there actually is gameplay of this one, and as you can see right here, this summons this cool black hole and it sucks enemies in every second or so. It hits them about like 3 or 4 times, and then does this pretty big explosion. Now, this is obviously going to be really good against those enemies that can get staggered, because you can just like infinitely stun lock them. Against enemies that do have hyper armor,
I wonder if it's gonna be an infinite stun lock in PvP if you get hit by multiple of them. Imagine 2 people landing that on you, and then you just get stuck in there forever until you die.
dodges, they are going to be able to dodge it pretty easily because it doesn't really attack that often. And the total overall damage isn't going to be that high, but this spell only consumes 18 FP. And obviously this spell is going to have a great synergy with basically any other spell. You can just use it and have a whole group of enemies just like get clumped up together, infinitely stun locked, and you can just use your other types of damaging spells to either clean them up or just do like immense amounts of damage. I see this spell getting lots of uses. It's actually pretty good. There are the spells Glintstone Nail and Glintstone Nails. The one you see on screen right now is Glintstone Nails. It kind of just seems like it's another sorcery projectile attack. It does have somewhat nice tracking.
Somewhat nice tracking, and like the speed that the projectile travels is like sort of like staggered just to make it
There are the spells
dodge.
Glintstone Nail and Glintstone Nails. The one you see on screen right now is Glintstone Nails. It kind of just seems like it's another sorcery projectile attack. It does have somewhat nice tracking. The damage isn't really too high, doesn't really get good stance damage at all. It does consume at 23 FP, and there is like the regular Glintstone Nail version that just shoots out like 1 projectile that doesn't get like any tracking for 12 FP. Now, one thing that I actually noticed about these spells is that enemies don't really like input read or dodge it. I was using it a little bit and I didn't really notice any enemies trying to dodge it at all. So it might perform somewhat similar to the knight-based sorceries, but those ones are probably just going to be better.
It's going to be perfect for scrubs. Just stand back and just keep casting those same spells and enemies won't dodge it. Perfect. This is how I like my game.
Thing that I actually didn't test is whether or not it actually does physical damage or magic damage. Hopefully it does do physical damage, because actually will give it a use. But the way it stands right now, there's not really much of a reason to use Glintstone Nails over things like Star Shower or Ancient Death Rancor, because those ones can just perform better. Now, time to talk about all of the different Ashes of War that I played with. Ooh. Now, I already did talk about some of the Ashes of War in the weapons section, so I'm not going to really talk about too many here. There's only about 5 that I want to touch on. First one being Crucible Wings. Yes, this is actually an Ash of War that can be equipped onto multiple different types of weapons.
This is likely going to be useless, I think. I mean, we can't know for sure until we try it, but this doesn't look that great.
Wings. Yes, this is actually an Ash of War that can be equipped onto multiple different types of weapons. The whole animation does get infinite hyper armor. The recovery...
Well, never mind. Fuck me, man. Why infinite hyper armor all the time?
Frames can be a bit long, so you might notice that you're going to get hit a bunch every single time that you use it. And as you can see with this attack right here...
Well, technically, guys, like, you know, if it's like, what's it called? You know, Lion's Claw has like crazy hyper armor. It starts its hyper armor frame 1, but it's still useless. So hopefully this is still the case here. It balances itself out with the recovery and long wind up. So I think this is going to be like the same situation with this one, even if the hyper armor is great.
That you're going to get hit a bunch every single time that you use it. And as you can see with this attack right here, it definitely looks a lot different compared to when like a normal Crucible Knight uses it, because this one is like a really cool flurrying attack, whereas the Crucible Knight does a poking attack. And that is because depending on the weapon that you use is going to be dependent on the animation. If you use Crucible Wings with a light greatsword or a greatsword, it's going to do the poking attack. Using it with a twin blade is going to make it do this attack. And basically with almost...
I wonder if it's going to replace like a piercing fang type of attack for like more weapon classes. You know what I mean? Like if you could have a curved sword with basically what would be the timing of piercing fang. You know what I mean? I wonder if it's going to be like something like that.
Every single weapon, the animation lasts just as long. So just pairing it alongside larger types of weapons is going to make it do more damage. When I used it with a light greatsword, it didn't really perform
Tracking is too bad. Well, we'll see if we can unlock and like kind of manually aim where we shoot. This is going to be different as well. We'll see.
that well in terms of damage. So using
But Piercing Fang has no hyper armor. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Isham. Like, if it has the same timing as Piercing Fang, it's gonna be like, well, depending on the damage and everything, it could be like a new option instead of using Piercing Fang. That's where I'm getting at. Yeah, I know Piercing Fang doesn't have hyper armor, but this does, which is where I'm getting at.
it with like a greatsword is going to make it do a lot more.
Recovery seems pretty backstabbable. I mean, yeah, I think you need some downsides too, but it's too hard to tell, like, by just watching it. Like, you'd have to, like, press the button, like, see how much, like, understand how much time it takes from the time you press the button by the time the animation comes out, and then afterward, when you press roll, how much time it takes for the roll to come out afterward. Like, these are really, like, things you need to try out yourself in order to know, like, how good or bad this thing is going to be.
Really perform that well in terms of damage. So using it with like a greatsword is going to make it do a lot more. It is going to be a sacred or holy based weapon skill, although it is just going to scale off your weapon level and your weapon AR. It does not necessarily.
I'm interested in the multi-hits though that it does. Like, it does a lot of multi-hits there. I wonder if all these hits like stun or if you can poise it, because that could definitely be interesting gameplay wise.
Attack using it with a twin
like to be able to chip someone
blade is going to make it do this attack.
And then have him be stunned.
And basically with almost every single weapon, the animation lasts just as long. So just pairing it alongside larger types of weapons is going to make it do more damage. When I used it with a light greatsword, it didn't really perform that well in terms of damage. So using it with like a greatsword is going to make
New Gundyr swap just dropped. Yeah, imagine that, Brenna. Imagine if this is actually like the Gundyr equivalent. You know, it could be. Who knows?
do a lot more. It is going to be a sacred or holy based.
You know what, Brenna? That could be. Who knows, dude? That could
weapon
actually
skill,
be.
although it is just going to scale off your weapon level and your weapon AR.
It does look slower than Gundyr.
Does not necessarily just scale with faith, and it does only consume at 15 FP, which is pretty good. Flame Spear is another Ash of War, and the best way to describe this one is that it is going to be a fire-based poking attack. Does shoot out a little bit of a fire AoE after the poke, and hitting with it at point blank range is going to make it do bonus damage because you're hitting with both the weapon and the fire projectile.
That's interesting. I wonder if I can put that on my Great Lance.
Being that it is a fire-based Ash of War, it is going to scale off strength with that projectile attack or faith, depending if you have it flame art infused or not. This skill actually can also be fully charged to obviously make it do more damage and make.
Oh, I love Ashes of War that you can fully charge though. Like Ice Spear but fire, and you can like charge it. That's kind of nice. Probably like Ice Spear, but he said you can charge it. You can't charge Ice Spear.
It is a fire-based Ash of War, it is going to scale off strength with that projectile attack or faith, depending if you have it flame art infused or not. This skill actually can also be fully charged to obviously make it do more damage and make the projectile go further. The best way to describe this attack.
That's interesting. And make the projectile go further. You know, it reminds me of that one thrusting sword that shoots like a little icicle. What's the name of that thrusting sword, guys? There's one the Frozen Needle. Thank you, was. So, like the way it describes it, it sounds like the Frozen Needle, but basically for like spears, and like in a form of an Ash of War, basically. That's what it sounds like. Let's just listen to him again.
With that projectile attack or faith, depending if you have it flame art infused or not. This skill actually can also be fully charged to obviously make it do more damage and make the projectile go further. The best way to describe this attack is kind of like Lady Maria's lunging poking attack that she gets. Kind of looks similar to that, but it doesn't really go as far. Like Lady Maria's lunging poking attack that she gets. Kind of looks similar to that, but it doesn't really go as far. But this skill also does buff the weapon with fire damage. It gives it plus 90 or plus 95 fire damage.
Whoa. You know, for the record, when you buff a weapon with, let's say, Flame Strike, when you buff a weapon with Sacred Blade, you get an 80 AR increase. So I don't know if this guy is like just not giving the right number, or if it is actually 90 or 95, that is going to be higher than what we currently have for self buffs for weapons.
This skill also does buff the weapon with fire damage. It gives it plus 90 or plus 95 fire damage from my testing, which is very similar to Flaming Strike. Now, typically, Flaming Strike...
Wait, but he said damage. I don't know if I don't know if he's talking about AR or damage there.
Plus 95 fire damage from my testing, which is the weapon with fire damage. It gives it plus 90...
I think he's talking about AR.
or plus 95 fire damage from my testing, which is very similar to Flaming Strike. Now, typically, Flaming Strike is going to be better in most cases, but this thing can actually be equipped onto Colossal Swords, which...
Oh, whoa, okay.
Flaming Strike, you cannot equip that onto Colossal Swords. And this actually does...
Dude, we are actually missing some useful Ashes of War for colossal weapons. So it's going to be nice to have like something else to play with. That's really good.
Buff it in a quicker animation. So Flame Spear might honestly be one of the better options in the game. There is going to be another gravity-based Ash of War that can be equipped onto like these poking attack type weapons. I forget the actual name of it, but it does this cool gravity tornado attack. Best way to describe...
Gravity tornado, so it's gonna be like Black Flame Tornado at home, but that sucks everyone in.
But it's kind of similar to like Dragon King's Cragblade, but instead of turning into a cloud, you turn into like this cool gravity tornado. You don't really go as far as Dragon King's Cragblade, nor have as good a tracking, but it does do it in a larger AoE. It does stagger enemies really nicely, and it does some pretty good damage. Divine Beast...
I wonder if this is going to have like quick hyper armor.
Frost Stomp is another Ash of War, and this one is basically identical to Frost Stomp. The projectile goes like just as far. They both don't really do good stance damage. It procs Frost just as fast, but the difference is that this one has like a longer animation, costs a bit more FP, but just does more damage. It probably does like almost just as much damage as like the old Frost Stomp way before it got nerfed, but being that it does have a slightly longer animation, it is going to be a bit more balanced. And the last Ash of War I want to talk about is this cool poison kick attack. I forget the actual name, I'm sorry. But this Ash of War can be equipped onto all different types of weapons. And it is essentially going to be like a poison the moth flight, but just like a kicking version instead. It does have like a longer animation. Kind of hard to track, but it does do really good damage against enemies that are poisoned. And unlike Poison Moth Flight, it doesn't actually remove the poison. So you can just keep using it over and over again when an enemy is poisoned and do some really nice amounts of damage. I didn't really test it out that much and I couldn't really see its full potential, but hopefully this means that poison builds are a lot more viable. Getting in...
I mean, poison build are very, very viable, if I may.
To the new talismans of Shadow of the Erdtree, these are just broken. Now starting off with, there is an of Shadow. Hopefully this means that poison builds are a lot more viable.
Slow down there.
Getting into the new talismans of Shadow of the Erdtree, these are just broken. Now starting off with, there is an arcane heirloom, so there is a way to get +5 to arcane via...
Okay, well, that's a good start. +5 arcane, just what we needed.
For a talisman, that's cool. Not sure if there is an arcane crystal tier.
It's not gonna be that bad though, to be fair. I think it's fine to get like a +5 arcane, like we have it for every stat.
But there is definitely a talisman now. But to start off with, the first one I want to talk about is called Rellana's Cameo. Now this skill actually boosts the potential of stance-based weapon skills. So that's things like Unsheath, Square Off, some of the new skills that I talked about with the Light Greatsword and the Great Katana. Now,
I wonder if that's going to stack with like Alexander's Shard though. That's going to be doing nasty damage if that's the case.
From my testing, basically how it works is that when you hold onto the stance for 1 second, your next stance attack does 15% more damage, which that is
interesting. So basically my Moon Veil is going to do so much more damage. Are you saying you're buffing my Moon Veil, my favorite attack in the game?
It's just stupid. That is basically the equivalent of the Godfrey's icon, but just for stance-based weapon skills. So that means that things like Moonveil Katana, the new power stancing light greatswords I talked about, and the Sword of Night and Flame, these things are going to be doing 15% more damage now. Like this attack right here, that can do 15% more damage. That's basically just as much as the Shard of Alexander, and it's going to stack with the Shard of Alexander too. There is another talisman called the Crusader.
Bro, I was already getting 2-shot by fucking Moonveils, man. Like, if they had, like, the proper stats investment, now I'm gonna be even more 2-shot.
Crusade Insignia. This talisman gives...
Or I'm gonna get 2-shot even more often by Moonveil. Dude, why do they have to buff Moonveil? Dude, they're so fucking out of touch, man. From Software is so out of touch.
Do more damage every single time that you get a kill. Now the damage itself is actually 10%, which is actually very decent. There's another talisman called the Crusade Shard of Alexander, and it's going to stack with the Shard of Alexander too. There is another talisman called the Crusade Insignia. This talisman gives you more damage every single time that you get a kill. Now the damage itself is actually 10%, which is actually very decent damage. That's like just as much as like Ritual Sword Talisman. But the best part about it, it lasts 30 seconds.
Wow, okay. That's interesting, though. That actually is interesting.
There are a lot of enemies in this game. You're basically
Bro, you're gonna have people now, like, gankers are gonna be going around trying to kill goats and kill fucking rabbits and all that stuff to get a fucking 10%.
always going to have like a 10% damage boost throughout every single dungeon, every single legacy dungeon. That's just basically constant 10% more damage. Now this is just going to boost your weapon damage. This does not boost your spell damage at all. All like the insignia talismans always just work this way. But yeah, this one is also going to be really good. Now the last talisman is called Enraged Divine Beast. This one actually does enhance your storm attacks. Unfortunately, Enraged Divine Beast. This one actually does enhance your storm attacks. Unfortunately, this one was actually
Fucking morons, dude.
off a remembrance, and I picked the other option of the remembrance and I didn't have time to duplicate it, so I'm not sure exactly what it does, but I'm guessing that it's going to boost your storm-based Ashes of War, kind of similar to like the Raw Medallion.
Bro, Farm Software is legit, like, low-key kind of clueless. Like, holy shit.
Boost your breath attacks. So if that's the case, this is probably going to be 10% more damage to Stormblade, Stormcaller, Storm Assault, which is just stupid because some of those skills are just really good. I might be wrong, and I wish.
No, they're not really good. They're really broken. Like, they're like priority broken. Like, Storm Stomp and Storm Assault have been a problem. Like, Storm Stomp has been a problem since the fucking network test. We've been fucking sending videos about it since the network test for them to change it. They never did. Storm Assault right now is like one of the biggest problem for PvP. God fucking damn it, man. And now they just boost it. It makes no sense.
Wish I actually did test it out, but yeah, this thing has the potential to be amazing as well.
And Stormblade is already like very strong too. Like if your Stormblade does even more damage, like god damn, man, like this is so stupid.
Deflecting is now accessible in Shadow of the Erdtree, and it is going to be via a crystal tier called the Deflect Hard tier. Now, if you don't know what deflecting is, it basically is just a perfect guard. If you block at the correct time, which is typically just as an enemy hits you, you don't take any damage and you take a lot less stamina damage. Now, I did acquire the
So they fixed the perfect blocking and they implemented that.
the Deflect Hard tier of this big fiery giant dude. This guy's not a boss, by the way, and I did it like right
All your time learning perfect block, guys. It's all gone. All gone to waste.
at the end of my playtime, so I didn't have much time to test it out. I only used it with a shield, so I'm not sure how it works with like a regular weapon. Not sure if it just negates all types of damage. But one thing it definitely does do is kind of like negates like almost all of your stamina consumption. You basically take like 90% less stamina when you do a perfect guard compared to like a regular block. And the deflect timing is actually somewhat forgiving. It doesn't really feel as easy to do in Sekiro. You can't really
So it's somewhat forgiving. Okay. Okay. I don't know about that. Like, shield poking is so bad. Yeah, I don't know about that. Like, I'm thinking, you know, I don't know, man. I will have to see it.
really spam it. You have to be a bit more precise with your timing, it seems like. But it is actually still pretty forgiving. Now, in Sekiro, when you deflect it, it actually does break posture or like your stance. But in this game, it doesn't actually do that. But it does actually boost your guard counters, which from my testing, it boosts your guard counterattack damage by 40%, which means that this is a crystal tier. It is going to stack with the curved sword talisman, and every single time that you get a perfect guard, you're doing immense amounts of damage. I used it a few times with the light greatsword, and the light greatsword gets a cool like double swiping deflecting attack, and all deflecting attacks do really good damage, really good stance damage. Some of the best guard counter weapons.
Man, they really wanted to buff these useless guard counters. Like, it is a useless mechanic. They shouldn't double down on it. They should fucking bury it.
Will be things like flails, hammers, even great spears as well. These things are really quick and do high amounts of stance. Now, I didn't actually test out exactly how long this actually goes for, but I'm assuming 3 minutes, because when I did use it, I noticed that it doesn't really go away that quickly, and most of the other crystal tiers in this game last about 3 minutes, so that is going to be my assumption. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up right now. Yeah, that was a lot, but I do have some more information to share, which I probably will include in tomorrow's video and make some Twitter posts about these things as well, so definitely give me a follow there. There was
No, gout counters is for scrubs, dude. Like, it doesn't even follow, like, the right philosophy gameplay-wise, because it favors being passive over being aggressive. Like, it's just not a good mechanic, dude.
like a little bit of stuff here and
Alright, let's watch Oroboro. Let's see here. All right, Oro, let's see what you got.
Hey guys, Oro here, and I got to play 3 hours of the brand new Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. In this video, I'll be talking about my experience, which includes new weapons, areas, bosses, and more. Thank you so much From Software and Bandai Namco for inviting me out to LA to your preview event. You guys are amazing, and I had an absolute blast. Unfortunately, I couldn't record my own footage from this event, so what you're seeing now is pre-recorded by From Software from the areas we experienced. And if you're worried about spoilers, this is all from the very first main area of the DLC. We weren't allowed to go past a certain point. However, I will be covering the entirety of what we got to experience. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The first thing I noticed was that they actually patched the Bandai Namco flashbang loading screen to a black background instead of a white, which is
Nice.
a welcome change. When the game loaded up, we were able to pick from 6 different pre-built characters: Warrior, Knight, and Sorcerer, and type A or B of each. Warrior was a strength build, Knight was a dex, and Sorcerer was int. Each of them were level 150 with maxed out weapons and talismans, which gave me the impression that this is around the level they expect most players to enter the DLC. Each build also featured new DLC armor sets, and had tons of new weapons and spells for us to try while we were playing.
By the way, the Japanese meta, like when I watch like Japanese players, they play at 150. So I'm just saying. And like when you used to watch Japanese player in Dark Souls 1, they played at 200.
Of course, I had to pick the Knight, which had armor similar to the Knight that appeared in the trailer. When I loaded in, I found myself next to Miquella's cocoon at Mohg's Palace, the entrance to the DLC. If you guys don't know, before entering the DLC, you have to defeat Radahn and Mohg. Now, because they defeated both on this character, there was a new NPC waiting for me there. I immediately recognized her as the Knight from the trailer. She claimed her name was Lady Letta, and urged me to touch the hand to get whisked away to the land of shadow in search of Miquella. In typical Souls protag fashion, I did the only thing we always do: touch things we probably shouldn't. I was then teleported to the lands of shadow, also known as the Shadow Realm, Jimbo. I walked out of a small alcove I spawned in and took in the beautiful view right before
Bro's reading like a fan fiction. I think I like the way Oro is doing it. It makes it very interesting.
sitting down at the very first sight of grace. I noticed 2 brand new menu options, which ended up being the new damage scaling feature unique to the DLC.
See, like we didn't get this information yet, so that's great. So, okay, new menu for the damage scaling for the DLC. That's interesting. I wonder if that's gonna apply in PvP, or if it's just gonna be against like mobs in the DLC area.
The first one is called Shadow Realm Blessing, and to quote directly from the game, Scadutree Blessing Fragments bolster the recipient's abilities to deal and negate damage, but has no influence outside the realm of shadow. What this means is that the more Scadutree Blessing Fragments you collect and burn at the site of grace, the more powerful your character will become in the Shadow Realm. The fragments are scattered throughout the DLC to reward and encourage exploration. The higher the upgrade, the more fragments required. I instantly thought of the insane challenge runs that people are going to do with 0 Scadutree blessings in the DLC. The second option is called Revered Spirit Ash Blessing, which, quote unquote, bolsters both summon spirits and spectral steeds' abilities to deal and negate damage, but has no influence outside the realm of shadow. This one is for Spirit Ashes and Torrent, a totally separate resource. After leaving the site of grace, I immediately started trying out the new weapons. There are 8 new weapon types so far in the DLC: throwing blades, light great swords, backhand blades, great katanas, hand to hand, beast claws, perfume bottles, and thrusting shields. There is also a set of unique throwable weapons called Smith Script weapons, weapons that had seemingly normal movesets aside from their unique R2s that threw the entire weapon.
Ah, see, this is the info no one fucking gave. This is important.
Seemingly normal set of unique throwable weapons called Smith Script weapons, weapons that had seemingly normal movesets aside from their unique R2s that threw the entire weapon.
There you go. So the weapons have a normal moveset, but the R2s throw the weapon. That's good. That's good. That's what we wanted to know. That's good, though. That's way better than just throwing every attack. That's good. That's good to know. It's basically like, guys, think about the Wing of Astel. Yeah, exactly, Moaz. The Wing of Astel R2. Basically, exactly that.
Seemingly normal movesets, aside from their unique R2s that threw the entire weapon.
That's good, though. That's good.
There was an axe.
Thank you, Oro. Thank you. It's so hard to get basic stuff out there.
Great
God damn it.
hammer and spear. A small exception to this was the Smith script dagger that was the throwing blade. I absolutely loved all the new weapon types. Trying them out was a highlight, but my absolute favorites were the dry leaf arts, the hand-to-hand moveset, the great katana, which was a great katana, and Milady.
Shout out to Oro. The great katana, which was a great katana. Yeah, I think the leaf art is going to be my favorite as well.
The great katana, which was a great katana, and Milady, which was the light greatsword. Very, very fun, and it just really felt fresh. It helped make the game feel like a whole brand new experience. It's worth noting that I found a weapon with a completely new experience.
I didn't notice. Look at the attack this enemy's doing.
It's worth noting that I found a weapon with a
It's like the Orolu, like, foot stomp.
completely new moveset, even though it had an old weapon type, which means that there might be even more unique weapons. I was told there are over 100 new weapons in the DLC.
What? Oh my god, dude. Holy shit. 100 new weapons? Oh my god, that is way more huge than the 8 weapon class. Holy shit, dude. 100 new weapons? Oh my god. Bro, there's like 100 weapons in the base game. Holy shit. Wait.
It's worth noting that I found a weapon with a completely new moveset, even though it had an old weapon type, which means that there might be even more unique weapons. I was told there are over 100 new weapons in the DLC.
100 new weapons in the DLC. Jesus Christ, dude.
And like a massive nerd that
This is fucking nice. This is the best news we've gotten so far. By far. Like, this is so cool.
I am, I wrote 100 new weapons in the unique weapon.
There's 306 weapons in the base game, you think? Well, 100 is a lot, dude. 100 weapons is fucking massive.
I was told there are over 100 new weapons in the DLC.
Jesus, man.
And like
45 new straight swords. Hopefully there's a strength straight sword.
Like a massive nerd that I am, I wrote down all the exact descriptions for the new Ashes of War that I'll be going over in another video.
Thank you, Oro.
But for now, let's get back to the playthrough. I immediately ran through the fields and started exploring as much as I possibly could. I started out by going to the west, where I found a beautiful field of flowers with the dreaded blue worms. I was shocked to find out that they're actually friends until you attack them. However, at which point they turn red and start beating your ass, Ocarina of Time chicken style. Immediately after fucking around and finding out,
I really like that armor. Really cool armor. I might use that helmet.
a giant gargoyle bird started attacking me alongside them.
Wait.
Fucking around and finding out, Ocarina of Time
Okay, I get
chicken
it.
style. Immediately after fucking around and finding out, a giant gargoyle bird started attacking me alongside them. And me being the coward I am, immediately started running away down some stairs into a nearby catacomb that went straight into a fog gate, where I was greeted by yet another asshole, the Black Jail Knight, a knight NPC from the gameplay trailer with the rapid fire crossbow. I was soon to find out that I had made a grave mistake, and I probably should have taken my chance at the wormies. He used a great sword and a unique Ash of War, which seemed like a sped up vacuum slice, with a follow-up slash that had insane forward momentum. His rapid-fire crossbow's weapon art started off with a slow fire rate, then quickly ramped up into a machine gun of death, similar to a chain gun. He basically one-shot me with every single attack he did, but after a few deaths, I finally beat him, and he dropped his weapon and armor set. The Great Sword of Solitude and the Armor of Solitude.
Nice.
This is when I noticed a brand new feature. There was a recent item tab and a yellow exclamation mark next to new items. Both of these were toggleable in the options and a welcome quality of life addition to the game.
Okay.
After that fun encounter, I went back to Warm Hell and started heading towards the center of the map, which I found a small ruin with some weak shadow enemies. They died in a few hits and were totally pathetic for the most part, until one of them actually hit me and did half my health. It was at this exact moment I knew that the DLC was scaled for higher levels.
This knife looks really nice.
And realized that the build they gave me only had 50 vigor.
Dude, even From Software doesn't know how to spec their own characters. That's so funny.
He was scaled for higher levels. And realized that the build they gave me only had 50 vigor. I quickly pulled up the map to teleport to Renala, and was surprised to see that the DLC map was completely separate from the base game map. There was a button to toggle between the two.
So basically like Skyrim Dragonborn map.
I also discovered a new map feature. Summoning pool list, which toggled all the summoning
No, it's not. It's another knife, guys. Come on. That's not what the bandit knife looks like.
pools that were activated on new map feature.
Let's take a look again.
There was a button to toggle between.
No, that is not the bandit knife. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Like, seriously? That's not the bandit knife.
Between the two. I also discovered a new map feature, Summoning Pool List, which toggled all the summoning pools that were activated on the character. Even after respecing to 60 vigor with Renala, I was still taking extreme amounts of damage from everything. I made it my goal to try to find more Scadutri blessing fragments to upgrade my character. In the distance, I saw the flaming giant from the trailer and immediately went to beat his ass. He stomped me into the dirt and killed me in a single hit. So that didn't go well. After respawning, I noticed the yellow rune in the distance, which I recognized from the trailer. Around it was a site of grace with 2 NPCs.
Another. Treading the heels of Miquella. Then, as that woman would surely say, we are in our purposes well aligned. But understand, your kind are not forgiven. The Earth Tree is my people's enemy. By Marika long betrayed. Set aflame.
America. Oh, I get it. America long betrayed.
Our delivery will come.
From Software is sending a message.
One of them introduced themselves as Redmane Freya, who fought alongside Radahn, and the other didn't mention his name at all, but he was apparently a horn scent. They shared with me that they were all followers of Miquella, following in his footsteps. The glowing rune was actually Miquella's cross, and touching it revealed the text. I abandon here the first of the flesh of my body. What does this mean? I don't know. Miquella's gross? Ask Vaati or something. A horn scent NPC gave me a map that marked 3 golden crosses, said to be Miquella's footprints. After speaking with the NPCs, I noticed an item nearby. It ended up being a Scadutri fragment, which allowed me to sit at the site of grace and upgrade my blessing to +1. I then pulled up my character stats, and my AR and damage negation were now gold and boosted significantly. Out of curiosity, I went back to the main game, and sure enough, the gold numbers were gone.
Okay, so it's really just for the DLC.
So if you run...
I don't know. I don't like that mechanic. I really think that this mechanic is like put in place because like From Software's whole fucking leveling up infinitely just completely shatters their own fucking balance. So they have to create like subsystems to like fix it. I really don't think it's a good idea, but I mean, whatever. That's what we got.
Run around and explore and grab all the blessings. Your game will be a lot easier. After resting at the Grace, I headed even more west through a small path that led me to a giant set of stairs. Next to these stairs were 2 more NPCs I went to speak with. One of the NPCs was called Ansbach and told me he had worked for Moog, which is a massive red flag in my opinion, but what do I know? He told me there were 6 crosses in total. I then spoke to his companion, Moore, who was a very charming character that ended up being a merchant. He sold some crafting materials, pickled livers, and well-pickled turtleneck.
It's to make people not steamroll like you could in the Ring City when it came out. Yeah, I get it. I understand. But the reason why people steamroll is that From Software's leveling system lets you level up like forever. And so when you have characters that are like over level 200s, like, yes, it trivializes anything in the game. Like, it doesn't even make sense in the first place to be able to level up over 200. So that's why they're forced to create systems like that. So, like, this system is more like a result of a bad design to start with their infinite leveling up, which creates problem, and then they're forced to implement, like, subsystems like this, specifically for new content, because otherwise you're going to be steamrolling the game.
Which ended up being stronger version.
We've talked about this plenty. Like, it's one of the weakest part of their game. It's like the way they implement their leveling system, where you can level up to max level, and then once you're max level, the build that you made initially is non-existent. There's no more build. You just have everything. It's just bad design, really.
Of their base game counterparts. And in case you forgot, livers grant a boost to damage negation, depending on the type, and turtlenecks grant a boost to stamina recovery. The last thing he's...
Yeah, level cap is an easy solution. Like, level cap is the solution. Like, it's not that hard. Like, they should have made a level cap, like, many Souls games ago, because that problem was always present in every Souls game.
Sold was a note that talked about sealed spirit springs. It said that you should look for stacked stones nearby and topple them. Spirit strings allow you to jump with torrent, so this is extremely helpful tip.
And not to mention, guys, like, you know, this isn't like just, oh, like, E doesn't like this or that. Like, no. Like, having so many levels in a game like that, where, by the way, multiplayer is a big part of it, and I'm not talking about PvP, I'm talking about co-op. Like, it fragments the player base in so many different level brackets. Like, yes, you can play with your friend with a password, like, between any level, like you and your friend. But when you're trying to play with strangers or, like, matchmake with other people where you don't necessarily know them, then you get separated into, like, so many player pools that it becomes, like, tedious to like, try to find someone to play at your level. And it forces you to go all the way to level 300 plus, where you can matchmake with everyone that's, like, super over leveled. And then at that point, these levels shouldn't even be existing in the first place, because if you play at that level bracket, you're going to steamroll everything, and then the game's going to be boring. So you see what I mean? So like, having so many levels hurts the game, like, fundamentally on, like, many levels. So, like, just like it hurts the multiplayer matchmaking thing, where, like, you just have too many level brackets where it fragments your player base. That's another thing.
After talking to them, I ran up the big-ass stairs to open a big-ass door, which led me to an Indiana Jones temple of bullshit, where I got ambushed by, like, 7 scorpions, fought my way through them to the next side of Grace, which ended up being the entrance to the very first legacy dungeon, Belurat Tower Settlement. The boss of this area was the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, one of the first bosses you encounter in the DLC. Defeating him grants you his remembrance and his massive lion head helmet. The lion helmet granted 2 strength and 2 dexterity to its wearer. On your playthrough, be sure to go back and chat with the NPC in the area.
Guys, from all the videos you guys saw, because we just watched Vaati, we watched Yui, and now we're watching Oro, no one has mentioned a merchant that sells every consumables, though. Does anyone know about that? Because that was, like, one of her biggest, like, important asks.
While wearing the lion's head for a fun surprise. The Divine Beast Remembrance lets you choose between a talisman or an Ash of War. The talisman boosts quote-unquote Storm, which I'm assuming means Ashes of War, like Stormblade.
There probably isn't. Okay, so no one heard anything about that, unfortunately.
Storm Assault, Stormcaller, but can't quite be sure. The Ash of War is basically a super powered horse.
It's gonna be like 5 merchant. Well, I mean, it's fine if it's 5 merchant. It's fine if it, like, if it's scattered throughout the DLC, but basically, like, what's missing in the base game is the ability to buy, like, rod boluses or madness boluses, or be able to buy the material to craft a lot of the things that are not obtainable, or that are only obtainable through, like, ridiculously unrealistic farming. Or like multiple playthroughs, limited per playthroughs.
Frost Stomp that can be
One merchant that sells 4 strings. Yeah, exactly.
charged. Anyways, after clearing the area, I went north and found a new dungeon, the Ballarat Jail. I had recognized the dungeon from the trailer, but it was unlike anything I've ever seen in the base game. It had this eerie blue hue, and it was filled with tons and tons of living jars. Little did I know that the meaning this time was quite literal, as the warrior guts inside the jar came to life and snuck up behind me. It was absolutely terrifying. They were disgusting and grotesque, and instantly recognizable as something only FromSoft would create. In a weird way, they looked like really fucked up hermit crabs with the jars on their back. The whole dungeon was filled with these horrifying abominations.
So we're actually going to see what Alexander looks like from the inside.
As they hid as jars inside the environment and tried to sneak up on you in hallways and tiny platforms. While going through the dungeon, I noticed an elevator that took me up to a secret room with a great jar helmet. A jar helm that was massive and quote-unquote boosted all size jars. I also found a crafting book to create a hefty cracked pot to
Oh, so I was right. It is a consumable.
throw at enemies. Finally,
It's a hefty crackpot.
the boss of this hell dungeon was demi-human Swordmaster Ans, which instantly reminded me of Yoda. He was super small and nimble, jumped all over the damn place. He used Dark Souls 3 Aquamarine Dagger, and he Sekiro deflected my attacks.
Oh, guys, you know what that means? That the Aquamarine Dagger might be coming back.
He used Dark Souls 3 Aquamarine Dagger, and he Sekiro deflected my attacks. I can't make this up. He beat my ass for a long time until I realized he had no poise, and I just started spamming and sunlocked him to death. When I finally beat him, he dropped his Spirit Ashes, which allowed you to summon him in battle. I then exited the dungeon, straight out to a lake, where I found a very familiar foe, a bone dragon. As cool as it was, it ended up being a 1/1 dragon reskin from the base game, which was a tad disappointing.
Well, for me, I'm not disappointed about this kind of stuff because, like, as much as we like to criticize from software, like making a new enemy, like people don't realize how much work is involved into like creating new animations for these massive enemies. Like it is so much work. So like, yes, the reskins and all that stuff are annoying, but you have to give them a pass for that because they already have like crazy enemy variety. So it's hard to criticize them there. Like, you know, like yeah, animation is hard to do. Rigging for, like, you have to keep in mind it's not just animation. Like, well, at least we have new like good rigging tools now, but like animation for like these enemies is like it's like every enemy, unique enemy type deserve it, like has its own animation. So like making new animations for just like this specific enemy doesn't translate into the rest of the game. Let me give you an example. If you make an animation for a bipedal enemy, you can translate that animation to like any of the bipedal enemies or characters that are in the game. So you get to reuse that very often. But when it's like a dragon, like it's only for dragons, you know what I mean?
He dropped a dragon heart when defeated.
And it's a lot of work. Like, rigging is tedious, animating is tedious, it's very time consuming, it's very difficult to animate properly. And From Software has a very high standard of quality when it comes to animations. Like, I'm sure they could do like, you know, like a shabby animation, but they're not going to do that. Like, they're going to have all their animations be up to a certain standard that is fairly high. So that raises the bar to the difficulty and the time it takes to animate these things. And so all in all, you know, be considerate when it comes to like seeing an animation like twice or like some stuff like that.
Defeated. Next, I traveled through the thick fog to the north, only to find yet another catacomb, the aptly named Fog Rift Catacombs. Inside, I found lots of nasty ceiling traps with massive spikes 10 times bigger than the base game. I also encountered a brand new type of imp that I immediately hated just as much as the normal imps. There were also some mages spamming spells at me while I was trying to dodge the imps and the ceiling traps, which was super fun. But eventually, I got through it. The boss of this catacomb was the Death Knight, Godwin's loyal knight. After defeating him, I received his weapon, Death Knight's twin axes, that had the most insane weapon art.
Oh, okay, twin axe.
It started with a teleport, followed by a spinning slash that had absolutely batshit movement.
What the fuck? Man, come on. Like, what is that? A teleport followed by a spin slash? Come on, man. What the fuck is this?
Teleport, followed by a spinning slash that had absolutely batshit movement.
Oh my god. I feel like we're running out of ideas for weapon movesets at this point.
I was extremely excited and worried at the same time while considering the possibilities in PvP. Continuing on from this catacomb, I went south to the massive bridge, which led me to the next legacy dungeon, Ensus Castle. The boss here was R'Lana, Twin Moon Knight. Yes, R'Lana, not
R'Lana? I think he's talking about Ronaldo. Ronaldo's brother.
R'Lana. She dual-wielded swords and was extremely nimble. Defeating her gave you her remembrance, and you could choose between her 2 swords or a spell. After reading some item descriptions, it's clear that this was R'Lana's sister who chose to side with...
R'Lana. That rings a bell. You can't spell R'Lana without anal.
Mesmer. After defeating her, we weren't allowed to continue past her boss room, so I went back to the bridge and headed south, where I found yet another dungeon, the ruined lava forge, which I also recognized from the gameplay trailer. This dungeon had another familiar enemy, the magma worm, but it wasn't the final boss. In fact, there didn't seem to be a final boss.
Yo, Steel, thanks for the raid, man. Welcome back, guys. Welcome to Lore Master's stream. We are analyzing all the information we can find. And so far we've watched Vaati's vid, we've watched Yui's vid, and now we're watching Oro's vid.
In this dungeon at all. Just a legendary weapon at the very end called the Anvil Hammer. It was around...
The most crazy and best information or piece of news that we got so far is that we have 100 new weapons in the DLC. 100 new weapons in the DLC. That's insane. That is so good.
Around this time that I was warned that we only had 10 minutes left, so I started hauling ass. I ran to the hills to the west, where I found a man dying on the floor, warning me not to progress any further.
100 weapon need balance. And 10 new movesets. Damn! Damn!
Of course, I completely ignored his ass and ran straight into an NPC invasion. I was absolutely shocked when I saw the invader's name, Ancient Dragon Man. And sure enough, he looked exactly like the dragon forms we came to know and love from the Soul series.
Oh, that's interesting. So we might have some dragon forms.
This form was more like Dark Souls 2 armored form than anything. And it might just be an armor set, but it looked incredible.
Oh, okay, so it might be an armor set. I see.
And the second I defeated him, I was told to set my controller down, which is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. Considering this is the most fun I've had in a very long time, maybe since Elden Ring came out. I instantly knew that this DLC was going to be something special. And
well, to be fair, all of From Software's DLCs are pretty much the best part of their games. So
that even with the 3 hours we had, I barely scratched the surface. Well,
speaking of Dark Souls 3 DLC, you remember, guys, when Dark Souls 3 DLC came out and everyone was using the colossal Ring Knight's like ultra great swords? So like everyone was dying to that. They ended up nerfing it, and then afterward it ended up being like a non-issue. I think we're gonna have a lot of these moments in the DLC where like a new weapon or new Ash of War is gonna come out, and there's gonna be like a huge knowledge check for a while, and then it might get nerfed because of that. Maybe rightfully so, maybe wrongfully so, but I think there's gonna be a lot of that. So keep in mind that when it comes out, it's gonna be a big knowledge check for most of it.
was no doubt another masterpiece by From Software. So that's it. That was my absolutely incredible experience.
Okay, so Oro pretty much confirmed that this DLC is on par quality-wise with other DLCs that came in the past. So that's good. That's really good.
With Shadow of the Erd Tree. A quick shout out to my friends Distortion 2 and Larksa who helped me put everything together. Honestly, the most fun I had was finding out new things and freaking out about it with everyone. And now I'm thankful I get to share my experience with you guys and do the exact same thing. I hope you guys are all excited as I am for what will no doubt be one of the greatest DLCs of all time. Be sure to stay tuned for the next video where I'll be going over every single item I found in the DLC, including new weapons, armor, spells, talismans, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, as far as talismans is concerned, like we saw Yui's vid, he talked about talismans that he found to be like problematic or like prone to be broken. Like the one talisman that boosts like storm attacks or like storm ashes of war, that one is definitely a problem.
For more exclusive Shadow of the Erdtree content coming real soon. And thank you so much for watching, guys.
Thank you, Oro. Okay, well, okay, guys, what else would you suggest? We got Iron Pineapple that we didn't watch. We got... The others are just like variety content, which will be like no information really. I almost want to watch IGN just for the sake of it. Oh man. I suggest leaving Elden Ring PvP. Damn, dude. Fucking IGN. You guys really want to watch IGN, eh? Alright, we watch IGN.
Before we start this preview proper, a couple of quick notes. All of the footage that you're seeing here was provided by Bandai Namco, as I was not allowed to capture my own footage from the preview event. Also, let's start with a spoiler warning, because I know that discovery is one of the core elements of Elden Ring. So if you don't want any of that discovery compromised by hearing me talk about the things I found during my preview time, the TLDR of this preview is, it was awesome. It was like playing Elden Ring again for the first time, but with an endgame character in a brand new open world. Alright, now let's get to the preview. There was something magical about that first playthrough of Elden Ring, when everything was new and there was a prevailing sense of discovery and awe as I rode through the lands between, stumbling upon the horrors of Caelid, the beautiful vistas of Limgrave and Liurnia, and the treasures that awaited after a challenging dungeon.
I don't know, guys. The video quality is low here.
Which is why my 3 hours with Elden Ring's DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, was so exciting, because it felt like I was
like low-key, IGN has low bitrate.
playing Elden Ring again for the first time in
all these other content creators had like much better video quality.
Brand new realm to explore, with new discoveries, new surprises, new gear, and you'd better believe new challenges, even despite my provided 150 level character with endgame level gear.
The DLC looks much better than the base game in terms of color. Yeah, I mean, visually the DLC areas look amazing.
My 3-hour play session began at the Cocoon of the Empyrean Site of Grace, which is where you do battle with the optional boss battle, Mohg, the Lord of Blood. But this time, there was an NPC named Leda there as well, who asked me if I too was beckoned by Miquella. By examining the cocoon with Miquella's withered arm ominously hanging out, I was whisked away to the Realm of Shadow. It's hard to get a sense for just how big the Realm of Shadow actually is, but I will say that my first steps out into it were definitely reminiscent of the first time I emerged from the elevator and opened the doors into Limgrave. There were obvious areas of interest right from the
Wait. The elevator to Limgrave?
elevator and opens out into it were definitely reminiscent of the first time I emerged from the elevator and opened the doors into Limgrave. There were obvious areas of interest right from the get-go for me to explore, like a crypt that was directly to my left, some scorched ruins directly up ahead, a large castle off in the distance, and the towering flaming brazier enemy from the trailer roaming around just on the horizon. Of course, in true Elden Ring fashion, the very first enemy I encountered ended up murdering me, as if to reassure me that despite my level 150 character with a plus 25 strength scaled axe, along with 80 points allocated to strength, this DLC wasn't going to be a cakewalk for people with endgame builds that have run out of things to challenge them in the base game. It wasn't even a boss, it was just a random enemy that decided to drop down from above while I was exploring some ruins, with its dual-wielded chakrams that kept me tumbling backwards as I tried to dodge its twirling dance that never seemed to end. Once I got my revenge and a couple of paltry 1,000 runes for my trouble, again, this was just a normal run-of-the-mill enemy, I made a break down the beaten path and wound up at the first big dungeon of the DLC. Bellerat. The ultimate goal of the DLC is to follow Miquella's crosses, which essentially act as Miquella's footprints and signpost the plot-critical path. The first one I found also came with a message that read, "The Gate of Divinity."
Are you ready for the new cancer spells? So far, everything looks horrendous. Dude, there's like so many, like everything seems over the top. Look, one thing that, I mean, I'm happy that there's 100 weapons. That's probably what I'm most excited about. But, like, I get it. They're gonna show off, like, you know, the flashy stuff for the normies because they like anime stuff. But I would have liked to see, like, a good, like, base moveset for, like, a normal weapon. Like, we all see, like, these crazy attacks that, like, attack everywhere and, you know, it's, like, all over the top. I would have liked to see, like, you know, I probably, like, Oro was describing the Great Katana as well as Yui. They were describing the Great Katana as having, like, a very nice, like, normal moveset. I would have liked to see I would have liked to, like, witness the moveset of the Great Katana, pretty much.
Lies in the tower sealed by shadow. That is surely where kind Miquella is headed. We are no Empyreans, but we must locate the path that will lead us there. I will follow the crosses east. Bellerat itself was a fairly large dungeon that was somewhere between the size of something like Stormvale Castle and Castle Morn. It wasn't quite the size of a legacy dungeon from the main game, but it's still pretty lengthy and
Oh, that's interesting.
It wasn't quite that was somewhere between the size of the crosses east. Bellerat itself was a fairly large dungeon that was somewhere between the size of something like Stormvale Castle and Castle Morn.
Interesting. That's good to know, though. That's good information. So, every time we saw this Bellerat Castle described, it was described as a legacy dungeon. And this IGN person describes it as between the size of Morn and Stormvale. Yeah, Castle Morn is pretty tiny indeed. Stormvale is pretty big, but Castle Morn is tiny.
Large dungeon that was somewhere between the size of something like Stormvale Castle and Castle Morn. It wasn't quite the size of a legacy dungeon from the main game, but it's still pretty lengthy and filled with plenty of optional side paths, many of which I didn't get the opportunity to fully explore.
Okay, so maybe it's actually bigger, but he just didn't explore it.
It was a fortress filled with all
Maybe like Shaded Castle? Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
sorts of new nasties, from scorpions of both small and gigantic varieties, to relatively weak guards that like to hide around corners waiting to ambush me, to grave birds that sat perched on ramparts, to heavily armored knights with giant weapons that would occasionally use shoulder charges to bash me from 15 feet away.
Like, this is what I'm talking about, like, with the over-the-top
that would
thing.
occasionally use shoulder charges to bash me from 15 feet away. Every enemy I fought was a new encounter for me to learn, which was an exciting challenge to overcome. The boss of Bellerat is one that you no doubt will remember if you watch the reveal trailer. It's called the Divine Beast, Dancing Lion. It was a difficult fight, and one that required me to make use of one of the new summons in Shadow of the Erdtree, Black Knight Commander Andreas, along with swapping my weapon from the heavy-hitting Fire Knight's fire.
Too much goofy movement? Yeah, I would have liked to see some more standardized, like, movesets. But, like, when I say standardized, I don't mean boring, but, like, you know, a cool new sword moveset. The Great Katana was described as having a moveset like that. I would have been curious to see that. Because we only really got to see, like, all the weeaboo moves. But we didn't get to see, like, you know. I guess maybe they would describe the, or, like, people would say that the light greatsword, like, had one of these moves, but you just keep swinging, like, constantly, so it's hard to tell.
Sword to the much more nimble backhand blade, which allowed me to hit and run much more easily. Perhaps the coolest aspect of this particular boss was the fact that its second phase has it alternating between ice and lightning power-ups. forcing you to also have to contend with either random lightning strikes or massive AoE ice attacks that build up frostbite, on top of also avoiding his heavy-hitting attacks. Eventually, I prevailed, gaining the lion's head to wear as a helmet, horrifying but cool, along with his remembrance, and then moved on to the second main dungeon, Castle Ensis. This place reminded me much more of the Caria Manor, minus, the horrifying hand monsters. There were lots of magic-wielding enemies, including a giant in Carian armor that was very much like Bulls from one of those Everjail boss fights, and an extremely difficult Carian knight that brought to mind the fight against the enemy that guarded Renala's chamber in the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Fitting because this enemy guarded a boss named Rolana. Rolana was definitely the hardest boss to take down during the preview window, combining fearsome melee sword skills with extremely powerful magic attacks. In her second phase, her two swords would be imbued with red and blue flames, giving them all new attacks that would set the arena ablaze, and make her attacks extremely difficult to get out of the way of. And just when I thought I would have the win in the bag, she would float up into the sky and cast a version of Renala's full moon that would crash into the ground for 3 devastating shockwaves that could basically one-shot me from full health. If it isn't clear already, Shadow of the Erdtree is hard, but you're not left completely without a lifeline. Scattered throughout the realm of Shadow are scattered tree fragments that can be brought back to a site of grace and turned in, much like you would a sacred tear or golden seed. These fragments will decrease the amount of damage that enemies deal to you, but only while you're in the realm of Shadow. In addition to that, you can also find revered spirit ash blessings, which can be turned in the same way, but these will instead increase the amount of damage dealt by your spirit summons. While I didn't get to explore the optional paths as much as I would have liked during my 3 hours of playtime, I still managed to find plenty of brand new weapons, talismans, armor sets, cookbooks, crafting guides, and even an ancient dragon smithing stone. The new weapons were really cool too, with some really unique properties and weapon arts that made them behave quite differently from anything else in the main game. The heavy smith script axe, for instance, could be thrown with the press of the heavy attack button, without any sort of cost or resource tied to it, making it very effective both at a distance and close up. The Milady has a weapon art that puts you into a stance with your arm outstretched to the side, and from the stance you can do a number of cool follow-ups, like a leaping and lunging stab attack that's very...
There's a problem with that though, guys, help me out here for a second. Is there anything in the game that costs no resource that has an attack with like range similar to this though? Like this right there, that's a lot of range. Is there anything in the game that you can throw that has this sort of range? Like, we have the Moonlight Greatsword, like R2 projectile, but even then that doesn't have this type of range. Frozen Needle doesn't have this range either. Astel doesn't have this range either.
The heavy smith
Bombs are resource. You only have so many.
script axe, for instance,
No, Wing of Astel does not go that far, dude.
could be thrown quite differently from anything else in the main game. The heavy smith script axe, for instance, could be thrown with the press of the heavy attack button, without any sort of cost or resource tied to it.
So I guess it does not, because you guys keep mentioning things that do not fit that description. So basically we're getting like long range stuff that you can spam infinitely.
Making it very effective both at a distance and close up. The Milady has a weapon art that puts you into a stance with your arm outstretched to the side, and from the stance you can do a number of cool follow-ups, like a leaping and lunging stab attack that's very similar to what Melania can do. The backhand blade can be split into 2 swords when you dual wield it, and has a super sick weapon skill that has...
Wait, the backhand blade can be split into 2 swords. So when you two-hand it, it's 1 sword? No one mentioned that.
The backhand blade can be split into 2 swords when you dual wield it.
Interesting. So it's actually 1 sword that splits. No one said that.
And has a super sick weapon skill that has you dashing to an enemy's side to stab them in the ribs. I felt like I accomplished a lot in my 3 hours of playtime with Shadow of the Erdtree, but even then, it felt like there was so much left on the table. Right when my time ended, I was just about to explore a path marked by another one of Miquella's crosses that led down into what seemed like another one of...
You don't think that's what he meant? Yeah, I think Oro and Vadi would have said it if that was the case.
From Software's famous Poison Swamps. And just by listening in on other players at the event, it was clear that I missed at least one other dungeon with a seemingly exciting boss fight that I'm very much looking forward to attempting myself. Fortunately, the wait isn't much longer now, as Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is set to release on June 21st. Thanks for watching, and for more Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, make sure to check out our video.
Alright. Not too bad, IGN, I guess. Only Iron Pineapple
Fellas, we are so back. I was recently invited to LA to attend an Elden Ring DLC preview event. While there, I had the opportunity to play the game hands-on for 3 hours and experience the first region of the DLC. You can think of this as the Limgrave of the expansion. Despite the time limit, I think I was able to see almost everything. If you just want the short version of my thoughts, what I've seen so far is great, and I'm optimistic for the rest of the DLC. From Software has a proven track record for their DLCs being the best part of their Soulsborne games, and Shadow of the Erdtree is no exception, with the added bonus of it seemingly being by far their biggest DLC ever. The bosses, enemies, dungeons, level design, weapons, spells, art direction, etc. It's all top-notch stuff, and more or less exactly what you'd expect from FromSoft. That being said, the best way to describe this DLC would be more Elden Ring. I know that might seem redundant to point out, but
No, it's a good description. More Elden Ring.
I think it's worth mentioning because we've all been waiting over 2 years, and the hype surrounding the release of this DLC is unprecedented. With that type of hype, I think it's easy for expectations to balloon into something beyond the scope of the game. So yeah, it's more Elden Ring. If you love the base game, you'll love this. If you have issues with the base game, those are most likely still here.
I think that also applies to us, like the way he describes it. Like, if you have issues with the base game, for us it means like PvP wise, like all the unbalances and problems related to that. There's probably going to be more of that.
Anyway, let's talk details. The rest of this video will be me sharing my experience with the
Basically more good PvE and then more bad PvP.
3 hours I had to play the game, while providing some overall impressions along the way. I'll also separate the video into sections, so you're free to skip around if you want to avoid certain things. One last note before we get started, everyone who attended the event was unfortunately not allowed to record footage of their own gameplay. Instead, we were given 13 minutes of B-roll footage to work with for video content. So while I'll do my best to match up the footage with what I'm talking about, just know that there's a lot of stuff I experienced that I simply don't have footage for. My play session began with a choice between 3 different save files: a warrior, mage, and knight. I chose the knight, and that wound up being a dexterity build. Each of these save files was level 150 with multiple maxed out weapons in their inventory. After choosing my character, I loaded into the game right in front of the hand of Miquella.
It's saved, Bloober. PvP saved. Alright, that's my next title.
At the back of Mohg's boss room. I then touched the hand and was transported to the Land of Shadow. I was instantly stunned by how beautiful this area was. The sky, the grass, the fog, the structures in the distance. The art direction of this initial reveal is insane, and FromSoft is once again proving that they have some of the most talented artists in the industry. From this first sight of Grace, it was clear that I could head into multiple directions to reach different points of interest. But the first thing that caught my eye was a big fire guy in the distance, so I rode over on Torrent and was welcomed with him kicking flaming rocks in my face. Awesome attack, by the way. I really like this guy's design and the spectacle he provides as an introduction to the area.
I mean, you could say a lot of good things about this DLC announcement, but this boss design would not be one of them in my book.
I spent a couple minutes jumping over his fire stomps and hacking away at his ankles, but it was hardly doing any damage, and I figured it would be a bad idea to bang my head against the wall on this clearly optional encounter while under such a tight time limit, so I decided to just run past him. That being said, let it be known that I came back near the end of the play session and kicked his ass by just wailing on his ankles for 7 minutes straight. Following the road
From software bosses, man. How do you beat this boss? You just wail on his ankles for 5 minutes.
a bit further, I came across another site of Grace with a couple NPCs standing nearby. There was also a glowing cross with an important new item next to it, a Scadutree fragment. These fragments are typically found near other crosses scattered around the map, and you can turn them in for Scadutree blessings at sites of Grace. These blessings operate as permanent upgrades for your attack power and defense, but only when you're in the DLC area. The first upgrade costs 1 fragment, and then subsequent upgrades cost 2. And by the time I finished my play session, I'd raised my blessing level to 3 or 4. As for how much these boost you, I can't say for sure, but I did have the foresight to do a quick test when upgrading my blessing from level 2 to 3. I did a heavy charged attack on an unaware enemy. At Blessing level 2, it did 1427 damage, and at level 3, it did 1491. If you do the math, that's a bit over 4% extra damage. One thing to note is that on the stats screen, my stats were colored gold. I was confused by this at first, but it's likely that this is just a visual representation of the blessing kicking in. Therefore, my guess is that instead of raising your attack and defense by a certain percentage, these blessings are probably just raising our stat values by flat amounts. Like my attack power stat went from 700 to 720 or something. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, that's my guess on how it works.
Okay, yeah.
On top of that, I found another new item that functioned like the Scatter Tree fragments, but for Spirit Ashes instead. These items converted into revered Spirit Ash blessings, which provided...
Do these apply to PvP? Probably not, because from what Oro was saying, they don't, like, basically the buffs from these new things that you get, these gold things, they only apply while you are in this new DLC map, and they don't carry over to the base map. So I assume they will only be affecting the PvE in these maps, but I mean, could be wrong on that, we'll see.
Permanent upgrades to the attack and defense for all Spirit Ashes used in the DLC area. This came with the added bonus of making Torrent tankier as well. So
since they don't transfer to the main game, I would be very surprised if they transfer over to PvP, honestly.
Even if you don't use Spirit Ashes, it's worth tracking these items down and upgrading your character with them. Between these two new items, I think this is a really fun way to approach upgrades for the DLC, as it allows high-level players...
Absolutely, Daylight. It's it's a very good comment.
With completed builds to still get meaningful boosts to their characters without horribly upsetting the balance of the base game when they leave the DLC. It also lets you re-experience that satisfaction of collecting upgrades via exploration like golden seeds and sacred tears, but this time in a new setting and with a new twist. Anyway, I talked with all the nearby NPCs, and the general vibe I got is that they're all trying to track down Miquella and figure out where he's going. These fragments and glowing crosses were left by Miquella, and the main story thread of the DLC seemed to be uncovering the path Miquella took and discovering what his goal is. I'm not the lore guy though, so if you want a deeper explanation than that, I'm sure Vaati has you covered. As I continued along the path, I eventually arrived at a long set of steps leading to a giant door. This was the entrance to the first legacy dungeon of the DLC, Belurot Tower Settlement. Long story short, this place fucking rules, and I'm mad I didn't get to explore it fully due to time constraints. I think a good way to sum this area up is that Stormveil meets Leyndell, whatever that means, and it's pretty big.
Okay, so the IGN guy said between Morn's Castle and Stormveil, and then this here, he says Leyndell City meets Stormveil, so huge difference.
Lots of enemies, lots of ambushes, lots of secrets.
And let's be honest here, I trust Iron Pineapple more than I trust the IGN guy.
Find. It's good stuff. Legacy dungeons were the best part of the base game, and that is very much still the case here in the DLC. Now that we're getting to some proper combat, I want to take a few minutes to discuss some of the new weapons that were added. This is easily one of the biggest highlights to the whole DLC. I noticed that my character had multiple fully upgraded weapons in his inventory, so I did my best to switch weapons every 10 or 15 minutes to experience as much as I could. So
That's nice.
First of all, in an interview from a few weeks ago, we learned that there would be 8 new weapon types, but we didn't know the specifics yet for what all 8 would be. Now we do. The 8 types are Light Greatsword, Martial Arts, Beast Claws, Perfume Bottles, Reverse Grip Swords, Throwing Daggers, Great Katana, and Dueling Shield. Let's start with the Light Greatsword. This was the starting weapon for me, and it's called the Milady. This thing is fantastic. It's quick and combo focused, and the weapon skill puts you in a stance that allows you to either do a set of quick slashes with R1 or a jumping lunge attack with R2. Also note that you'll do multiple swings with just a single input. Like the guard counter here is a 3-hit attack. I also noticed the jumping attacks were similar, with them being 2-hit combos just from a single button press. This gives this weapon type a very distinct feel. I'm excited to see what other light greatswords exist in the DLC, since this one felt ridiculously smooth to use. After that, we have Martial.
So this is the second person that says that the light greatsword feels super smooth. So I guess all these attacks that we're seeing from the light greatsword are like different attacks, and it's just that the animations blend so well together that it makes the weapon feel super smooth.
A single button press. This gives this weapon type a very distinct feel. I'm excited to...
Like for us, these animation look so smooth that it feels like it's just one attack with like a huge long animation. But from the way these people were describing it, it's not. It's really just multiple different attacks, and it just chains together so well that it looks like one animation, but it's multiple, just chaining together.
to see what other light greatswords exist in the DLC, since this one felt ridiculously smooth to use. After that, we have martial arts. Dude, this weapon just kicks ass. There's not much more to say. It felt so good to use, and the way the attacks combo into each other was awesome. To all my Dark Souls 2 fans, remember the Bone Fist weapon? It's like that, but way better. So expect a Ratatouille flash.
Damn! Just getting the bar like super high, better than Bone Fist.
Moment when you get your hands on them. Next up, Beast Claws. Look at how fucking sick these things are. They're like the unhinged younger brother of the martial arts weapon.
Yeah, I don't know about
Flying
that.
around with them will make you feel like an actual animal, and while the obvious point of comparison would be the Beast Claws from Bloodborne, these ones feel notably faster and more acrobatic. Highly recommend. Perfume bottles are next. These ones really surprised me. You just get to throw out fire or lightning or whatever element. Surely it costs FP, right? Nope, you can do this as much as you want. And keep in mind, it's not a
Dude, I just cannot wait to have like one guy in a gang squad just fucking sit right next to the host and just spam this attack like constantly. Like this right there.
Surely
It
it
just
costs
stands
FP,
right next to
right?
the host.
Nope, you can do this as much as you want.
just does
and
this,
keep in mind, it's not a
like,
consumable.
over
It's
and
just a
over
whole
and
ass
over
weapon type.
again.
So you have one-handed and two-handed movesets, running attacks, jumping attacks, everything.
With light roll too, yeah, with light roll.
The charged heavy attack was my favorite, as it makes your character spin around, throwing the fire everywhere, and it's very effective in group settings.
Dude, imagine like 3 people spam this. Oh my god. Oh no.
Following that, we have reverse grip swords. This is
Parry this, you filthy casual, exactly.
actually the one weapon type I didn't get to try personally, but luckily we have a lot of footage of it here. As a bonus, check out this rapid fire crossbow they show off.
Still no news of a new great bow in the DLC.
Anyway, these things seem especially fast and evasive. Like, there's one move where you dash through the enemy while attacking at the same time. Also worth noting is that you can block with L1. Normally, this isn't possible when dual wielding 2 separate weapons.
Oh, that's it. Well, it is possible with fist. It is possible with claws. Like any weapon that's like made to have 2 in your hand at the same time, yes, you can block with the offhand. Unless he means that you can actually like equip like one of them and decide to equip only one, and like I don't know.
Also worth noting is that you can block with L1. Normally, this isn't possible when dual wielding 2 separate weapons, as
Okay, so it is 2 separate weapons. Okay, that's what he means.
L1 is the input to attack with both at the same time. So this confirms that they're a package deal, and as such...
Wait, this confirmed that they're a package deal. Did he try them or not?
is that you can block with L1. Normally, this isn't possible when dual wielding 2 separate weapons, as L1 is the input to attack with both at the same time. So this confirms that they're a package deal.
I'm confused there.
And as such, they have a more...
Like, it makes it sound like he didn't try them and he's like watching some footage just like us and he's like, you know, just guessing.
varied moveset. It also opens the door to landing guard counters while dual wielding. Very excited to try these. Next up, throwing...
Very excited to try these. So he didn't get to play with them. Yeah, he means it's paired, but like at the beginning he made it sound like, you know, he knew what they were, but he was just guessing really. But yeah, I mean, of course they're paired if you can block with them.
Opens the door to
Yeah, it's like fist basically.
landing guard counters while dual wielding. Very excited to try these. Next up, throwing daggers. Just like the perfume bottles, these caught me off guard because I was expecting there to be some sort of consumable or FP component to their attacks. But no, you can just rapid fire these out as much as you want and fully commit to a viable mid-range playstyle without ever running out. The weapon art has the added bonus of enabling the daggers to pierce through enemies. Next, we have the Great Katana. No footage of this one sadly, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a big katana. It's basically an odachi, which Neo fans should be familiar with.
I think the best description we got of the Great Katana was something similar akin to the Kensei in For Honor, which is nice because Kensei in For Honor has a pretty nice moveset.
Think length and girth rather than just length. Loved this weapon. The basic one has a weapon art that puts you in an overhead stance where R1 would be a quick slash down, and R2 would be 3 quick slashes instead. Lastly, we have the dueling shield. Sadly, the only footage we have of this thing is this one attack here during the up...
I'm confused here. Did Iron Pineapple get the meetup with the others, or is he just guessing like the rest of us? He didn't get to find everything in the 3 hours. He played it. Okay.
upcoming boss fight. The shield had pointed edges, and the move
I made it all up.
moveset involved a mix of thrusting and slashing attacks. It comes with the added bonus of being very well suited for guard counters when you two-hand it. And fun fact, this seems to be based on real-life dueling shields that actually existed. But yeah, as someone who gravitates toward goofy and gimmicky stuff, this one was surprisingly straightforward and honest. I think I need to mess around with it more before I settle on how I feel about it. So that's it for new weapon types, but there's one more big addition mixed into existing weapon types I want to mention. Check it out. Throwing weapons. These are new weapons that allow you to throw your weapon whenever you press R2 or strong attack, but they still double as melee weapons for light attacks. And guess what? 0 FP cost. You can throw them as much as you want. In my play session, I found a throwing axe, a throwing spear.
Honestly, like I'm looking at these throwing attacks and the jump R2, if this is what it is, the jump R2, if it's a jump R2, it's always going to stun. And so having like jump R2s that basically travel like such great distance is going to be quite something.
You can throw them as much as you want. In my play session,
like this attack right there, like that jump R2 is not really much slower than like other jump R2s that we have.
attacks. And guess what? 0 FP cost. You can
Not
throw
this,
them.
not the charge R2. Charge R2 is very slow, but
They still
take a look
double
at
as
this.
melee weapons for light.
That right there, like that looks super strong.
To throw your weapon whenever you press R2 or strong attack, but they still double as melee weapons
Boom,
for
right
light.
there. Like that's fast. That's very fast. And keep in mind, it doesn't cost anything to do that, like aside from stamina. Probably has shit tracking. Yeah, hopefully, honestly.
Attacks. And guess what? 0 FP cost. You can throw them as much as you want. In my play session, I found a throwing axe, a throwing spear, and a throwing great hammer. The great hammer made me laugh out loud because the charge R2 attack involves spinning the hammer in a circle before launching it across the room for 2,000 damage. Think Mario 64 throwing Bowser,
Or 2,000 damage. I think he's exaggerating
and
there.
you'll get the idea. Really love how FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that
Pardon me?
the idea. Really love how FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that seamlessly mix ranged and melee. FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options. Throwing Bowser, and you'll get the idea. Really love how FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that seamlessly mix ranged and melee. Is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that seamlessly mix. Really love how FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that seamlessly mix ranged and melee. How FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that seamlessly mix ranged and melee. Alright, that does it for weapons. Let's get back to the dungeon. Like I said, it's a great and beautiful area, and I just wish I had more time to explore it fully. At the end of the dungeon, I finally arrived at the boss, the Dancing Lion. I absolutely love everything about this fight. First of all, look at how cool this design is. It's literally just a couple dudes in a costume, and you can see their feet poking out from underneath the fabric. This takes inspiration from the Chinese lion dancers in real life, and it's such a fun idea for a boss. The way it moves around is mesmerizing, and has some really interesting attacks. One of the coolest things about this fight is how it'll shift back and forth between different elements. It has a wind mode, lightning mode, and ice mode, and each of these is accompanied by unique attacks and hazards all over the arena.
And from
This
software
whole
has some
encounter is
really
easily one of my
crazy
new
boss
favorites for
fights.
Elden Ring. It was tough too. I got him on my third or fourth try, but I had to rely pretty heavily on my spirit ashes, and I think it would have taken me significantly longer had I not used them. My summon of choice was a new shielded knight commander because he seemed especially tanky, although I also had the option of summoning one of the giant hands from Karya Manor. I don't typically love to use spirit ashes, but I felt compelled to here due to the time limit. To be clear, there's nothing wrong with using them, and the game is very much designed around you taking advantage of them, so you probably should be using them. But yeah, I usually enjoy the challenge that comes from going solo.
AKA, you're not good enough. Use the Spirit Ash. I'm good. I'm not using it. That's what he meant.
Also, shout out to the soundtrack on this fight, and the DLC as a whole. Just fantastic stuff. After the fight, I continued higher up toward the main tower, but was stopped by some shadow branches that blocked my way. It was a dead end for now, but I found a letter on the ground that pointed me east saying Miquella was spotted in that direction. So I left Bellerot behind and went back to the overworld. I rode north until I found an interesting pile of bones in some shallow water. As is typical of cursed bones in fantasy settings, they came to life and formed into a skeletal dragon for me to fight. So finally we arrive at my main critique for the DLC as I see it so far. This fight was just a reskinned dragon from the base game, and while I could be mistaken, I'm pretty sure it had the same moveset as the dragons we've already fought before. If this was a one-off, sure, whatever. but I noticed a few other enemies from the base game being reused in other areas as I continued to play, and it gave me pause. Now look, in terms of the base game, I'm actually very understanding when it comes to the reuse of bosses and enemies. When you're making a game the size of Elden Ring and want to include 165 boss fights, it's unreasonable to expect them all to be unique. Think about how many animations with FromSoft tier polish go into even a single boss.
Yeah, he basically is saying the same thing we said earlier. When Oro was disappointed that the Bone Dragon had the same animations as other dragons.
It's insane, and I think they do a great job of making it work. That being said, I'm a little disappointed with that sort of base game reuse in the DLC. It's not egregious by any means, and was mostly just a few enemies here and there, but yeah, it's the type of thing that, at the very least, made me raise my eyebrows. Surprise and discovery.
Damn, dude, gamers are so hard to please these days, man. So hard to please. They want fucking balance, they want new animations. God damn it, they want good designs. Fuck, dude, it's so hard to please gamers nowadays.
Are some of the best parts of a first playthrough of any FromSoft game, and stuff like this slightly diminishes that. I wouldn't be bothered by the reuse of DLC enemies and bosses in other DLC areas, but I am a little bothered by the reuse of base game bosses and enemies in the DLC. Like, I don't know, man. I was just kind of deflated when I found a cave later on with a magma worm and...
Yo, Donut, thanks for the raid. Welcome in, man. Welcome in, guys. We're watching the DLC stuff.
After I'd already encountered 5 in the base game. And FromSoft, I love you, but do we really need more ulcerated tree spirits in the DLC? To be clear though, the vast majority of enemies and bosses are still new, and the variety of enemies in the DLC seems to still be on par with the rest of the game. As such, this is definitely a nitpick rather than a serious hang-up. And while it didn't rise beyond the level of slight disappointment, I still feel a responsibility to mention things that flag for me rather than just be a source of hype for the DLC. My opinions could change on this.
Wait, he's criticizing From Software? Guys, get your Reddit passwords. We're crucifying him.
Especially when I see the full context of the rest of the DLC. But yeah, this is how I'm feeling right now. Let's move on. After the dragon side boss, I explored a bit more of the overworld and collected some items before deciding to head further east. I rode across a bridge guarded by a few soldiers with a giant ballista at the end. And I'm sorry FromSoft, I got a nitpick here again. When I come across overworld hazards like this, I want them to fuck me up. I want them to be a real threat. For this, I kind of just rode straight across the bridge without getting hit by the ballista whatsoever. Anyway, after crossing the bridge, I was met with a war camp filled with soldiers and tents. It looked pretty similar to what you're seeing on screen now, but I believe this footage...
It's funny because, like, you know, it's just like, I'm just supposing here, but it sounds like Iron Pineapple. You know how he's been doing, like, a lot of dumpster diving of, like, Souls-like games? It almost sounds like a lot of these, like, clones of From Software games or Souls clones kind of raised this bar a little bit in some aspects. Like he was expecting this and expecting that, you know what I mean? Maybe he's seen like some things that he liked here and there with other games that have attempted what From Software is doing. Obviously they don't necessarily do a good job as FromSoft, but it does sound like it when he's like describing things like, you know, I wanted to cross the bridge and get hit and it didn't hit me, you know, stuff like that.
Of a different camp because the layout is a bit different and there wasn't a giant fire guy patrolling around. It was a neat little area, and it served as an introduction to yet another legacy dungeon, Castle Enus. Calling it a legacy dungeon might be a bit too generous though, so let's
calling it a legacy dungeon might be a little too generous.
Call it half a legacy. Castle Enus. It was a neat little area because the layout is a bit different. Them to be a real threat. For this, I kind of just rode straight across the bridge without getting hit by the ballista whatsoever. Anyway, after crossing the bridge, I was met with a war camp filled with soldiers and tents. It looked pretty similar to what you're seeing on screen now, but I believe this footage is of a different camp because the layout is a bit different and there wasn't a giant fire guy patrolling around. It was a neat little area, and it served as an introduction to yet another legacy dungeon, Castle Enus. Calling it a legacy dungeon might be a bit too generous though, so...
Okay, so this is in line, like he's talking about the castle. This is in line with what the IGN guy was saying, actually. That it wasn't as big as a legacy dungeon. It's more like between Morns and Stormville in size.
Let's call it half a legacy dungeon because it has the level structure of one and is very much main content, but it's just not that big. This area was fun to navigate, and once again, it's just a great level. And I even had a few opportunities for stealth with patrolling guards.
Although, like, it makes it confusing the way he talks. Like, I don't know if he's talking about the camp itself or the Legacy Dungeon anymore.
And once again, it's just a great level. And I even had a few opportunities for stealth with patrolling guards. I'll spare you the details, but fuck man, it's just such a joy to experience FromSoft areas for the first time. At the end of the area, the
That's so true. The first time you play, like, these games, it's, like, it's really the best when you don't know, like, what's around the corner and stuff like that.
boss is waiting. It was moon-themed, and their name wasn't Renala. Instead, it was Relana. Fucking class.
Oh, no. Oh, no, yeah.
I actually laughed out loud when I saw the name at the bottom of the screen. This boss isn't quite as much of a spectacle as the Dancing Lion, but it's still cool as hell. Relana is humanoid with dual swords and a little bigger than the player. Lots of flashy attacks and combos. My favorite is one during Phase 2, where they summon the moon. Kind of like the full moon spell from the base game, but this time it's 2 moons. And instead of being launched as a projectile, they both slam into the ground and create a shockwave. It's awesome. This boss took me a couple tries with my spirit.
Everyone's saying Ronaldo. It's not Ronaldo, it's Ronaldo. Ronaldo.
Ashes, though I think it would have taken me significantly longer if I ran it solo. Beating Relana opened a door in the arena that led directly into the next major zone, but I wasn't allowed to go out there as part of the preview session. It's possible I missed an alternate progression path similar to how it's handled with Stormvale Castle, but I think this boss is mandatory to enter the next region, so definitely a little less open than the intro to the base game by comparison. With my remaining time, I spent most of the rest of the play session running around to do as much side content as I could. I found a few caves, some catacombs, some ruins, and a bunch of other miscellaneous things. Despite my initial bad impression due to the skeleton dragon reskin fight, I think some of the side stuff is actually a step up from the base game. Specifically, the caves feel more fleshed out. Like, one cave I found near the first Legacy dungeon was this whole area themed entirely around the production of living jars. It was just really visually striking and a cool bit of environmental story.
That's good, though, because that was, like, one of our criticism for the base game was the actual dungeons were just, like, too reused to be interesting. So the fact that these are all unique is definitely great news.
Storytelling with giant jars littering this entire cave. And there were even jars hanging from the ceiling, resulting in some vertical level design and platforming. On top of that, there was a cool reveal where I got to fight human flesh blob monsters that usually end up inside of the jars, but here they're on their own as a new enemy. As a whole, it was a great bit of side content and quite memorable. Another good example of this type of side stuff was this big fire dungeon with even more unique enemies and level architecture. This footage we have of the entrance serves as a good teaser. I won't go into detail here, but yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing I was craving from the base game. More memorable, sizable encounters that break the mold beyond the standard caves, mines, and catacombs. I don't expect every bit of side content to be on this level, but if they keep mixing these in for the whole DLC, we're in for a good time. After doing everything I could find, I spent my remaining few minutes trying out the 2 other characters I could have selected at the beginning to get a feel for their weapons and spells. I've already covered most of this in the weapons section from earlier, but I do want to give special attention to the new sorceries and incantations. Some of these seem especially fun to use. A few of my favorites were the Gravity Bomb Explosion sorcery, an incantation that mimicked the beams of lights from the big flower enemies in the base game, and one where your head turns into a rune bear, kind of like the dragon incantations. Spellcasters are about to have a lot of fun. Before we wrap up, I want to share a few more
You want that hat? Yeah, that hat looks cool.
discoveries that I found that I haven't mentioned yet. First, both of the main bosses drop boss remembrances. For the Dancing Lion, I don't remember the first option you could trade it in for, but I went with the second option, which gave me a new Ash of War. It's essentially a super Hoarfrost stomp, so the ice stomp move from the base game, but this time it's bigger and you can hold L2 to charge it up. Big fan. For Relana, I had the choice between dual...
Wait, they literally stole some spells from the mod you're a dev for? It's crazy. Well, I mean, you have to keep in mind, Acetone, like, you are using their property. So they, like, legally, they actually have the right to use everything you're doing with this mod because you're using their IP. And this stuff is to be expected when you make mod for a game that's not yours.
Dual swords and a new spell. I didn't get the chance to try out either.
Instead, you should be you should feel proud about it, though. You should feel proud that they took your stuff.
For myself, but the spell seemed awesome because it's the same move from the boss fight itself, where 2 moons slam down and create a shockwave. Definitely seems like a fun one. Next, I did in fact find a crafting recipe for a giant fire pot, which I think is the same one shown off in one of the DLC gameplay trailers, but I sadly didn't get to try it for myself. So yeah, just confirming that as a consumable item you can find pretty early on. I also found a talisman that would raise my attack power if I used a weapon with a stance weapon skill and held down the stance button for at least 2 seconds. The Uchi Katana would be a good example of a viable weapon for this.
They should still seem less PvP. So true, man.
And I don't know, I just thought this was a fun idea for a talisman. While running around, I found these blue worm guys. I absolutely love
Probably some dev found a mod and thought, yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, probably.
them. But be warned, if you attack them, they will go fucking crazy. I'll let you discover what exactly they do when you play for yourself though. I also went to the southeast edge of the map and found a ruined church guarded by some knights. Next to this, there was a little alcove where I found the item America's Blessing. It seemed to function just like Divine Blessing from the Souls games, as it was a consumable that would fully heal you, but its item description caught my attention. I believe it said it was given to Miquella by Marika to aid him on his journey. It also said that Marika only made one of these. I think that's pretty interesting, as it implies Marika directly helped Miquella, and it raises some questions for how Miquella lost it and what that means for his journey. And yeah, that's
Even if it's coincidence, I don't think it's a coincidence, Aceton. I'm pretty like I don't know, like I haven't seen like the your mod versus like the things that they incorporated, but if you think it's very similar, like yes, absolutely, like it's most definitely inspired by that. Like these things don't happen in a vacuum, for sure.
That's about it. After the 3 hours were up, the lights came on in the preview room and we were told to stop playing. Before I move on to share a few more thoughts and answer some questions, I want to provide some feedback to Bandai's marketing strategy here, specifically the 3-hour time limit that we were all given. So I think the goal here was to actually not give people enough time, and in so doing, give them the impression that the DLC is just that big. In fact, I'm pretty sure a bunch of people who attended the event didn't even beat both of the main bosses, let alone all the side bosses. For those people, yes, I think they absolutely got that impression of the DLC being huge. However, the 3-hour time limit is awkward, because for people like me, it was actually just enough time to do everything, provided I was playing efficiently, not dying, and just kind of gunning it through the content. It felt like I was shoveling food in my mouth at a fancy restaurant without getting to taste or savor it properly.
That's a good comparison.
I was rushing it in a way that I wouldn't have under normal circumstances, and this has the knock-on effect of making the DLC seem smaller than it actually is. So yeah,
Right.
in hindsight, I'm not
Yeah, because the pace at which you try to complete that DLC is going to have a massive impact on how you perceive it. Like, if you take your time to grab, like, every item in every corner, and you take the time to explore every nook and cranny, it's going to feel so much bigger than if you just try to rush from one objective to the next. I know in our first playthrough of the DLC, we'll be trying to invade at the same time. So, you know, it's going to depend, like, for each playthrough for each person.
not sure if that specific time limit was the right call. Next, I'm going to answer a few questions I anticipate people having as we approach the release date for the DLC. What level should you enter the DLC? So for the preview event, we were all given characters that were level 150 and in new game. Now I think that was fine, but I wouldn't go higher than that. I think somewhere between 120 and 150 is probably ideal.
Dude, Iron Pineapple coming here to save the day, dude. He said, do not go above 150. You hear him? Guys, it's not me saying it. It's Iron Pineapple. Do not go above 150.
But I wouldn't go higher than that. I think somewhere between 120 and 150 is probably ideal, assuming you're not New Game Plus. Personally, I'd lean toward 120. How big is the DLC?
Personally, I would lean to 120. This guy is just so smart. He's just so fucking smart.
Okay, this is an important question.
He says the things that people do not want to believe, but it's so true. You should be around 120, not 150.
And one that I would love to answer accurately. We're talking about a $40 expansion here, so it's more than reasonable for people to want some assurance that it's worth it.
Someone send a clip of that to Peeve to make Peeve go at 120. Because I know Peeve plays at like 200 or something.
Ultimately, I can't answer this for sure, but if I had to guess, I'd say that what I experienced with this preview event was 20% or less of the DLC. 15% might be a better guess though. I could easily be off, but that's the vibe I'm getting. Part of this guess is based off an interview Miyazaki gave, where he said the DLC would contain over 10 new boss fights. Now, right away, that's obviously too low of a number if we count all the side bosses. I already fought 7 bosses in this first region alone. Therefore, I'm pretty sure that he's only talking about the actual main boss encounters. And since we only fought 2 here, the Dancing Lion and Merlana, we should have at least 9 more to fight. So yeah, that would line up with my 15 to 20% guess. And even though I did it in 3 hours, keep in mind that I played very efficiently. I only died a couple times to each of the main bosses, I didn't die whatsoever while traversing dungeons or exploring, I didn't die to any of the side bosses, and I didn't explore nearly as much as I would have liked. I'm confident I missed a fair bit in both legacy dungeons, and probably some side stuff too. So realistically, this first region will take most players a lot longer than the 3 hours I spent essentially speedrunning it. I'd say anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, assuming they're fully exploring and doing all the side stuff. And then if we extrapolate from that, I think this DLC will wind up being around half the size and length of the base game. This is all just a guess.
Wow, half the size and length of the base game. Jesus Christ, dude, that is not half the size of Limgrave. That's the half the size of the base game. That's crazy. No, I don't think that's right, though. I think that's just setting your expectations too high if you expect this to be half the size of the base game. I think we should tone it down there. I don't think that's right. I want to believe it, but I don't think that's correct. There's no way.
Yes, though, and I could easily be wrong. So if you're truly
like, they've been saying like this is half the size of Limgrave, not half the size of the base game.
curious, I suggest just waiting until the DLC is out and seeing what people say. Is the DLC too easy? I'm sure some of you must be thinking that because of how fast I was able to do everything in the first area. Well, there's definitely a larger discussion to be had about how FromSoft approaches difficulty in Elden Ring.
Dude, man, Iron Pineapple is so based, like...
First area. Well, there's definitely a larger discussion to be had about how FromSoft approaches difficulty in Elden Ring and what constitutes easy or hard. I'm going to sidestep that discussion and say that the difficulty is in line with the rest of the game and feels like a natural progression past the late parts of the base game.
Yeah, so basically it's too easy.
It's challenging.
It's too easy because you have access to a lot of cheese. It's not too easy because the bosses are bad or anything like that. It's just too easy because you can just cheese stuff if you know like what to use.
And engaging. You got to remember, I just recently did a whole super hard...
You know, just grab yourself like some bleed buff weapon. Or like rot the boss real quick and then just spam some projectiles, you know? And like, yeah, it's gonna be hard if you try to just sword and board 1v1 the boss, and it's gonna be like super challenging and perhaps way more fun. It's gonna depend on each and every single one of you, but if you actually try to win and you use like all the status you need, yes, it's probably gonna be easy.
Hard mode modded playthrough. So going back to vanilla Elden Ring felt like...
Or if you use the spirit summons, or if you use a caster, like these sort of things will make the game easy for sure.
Taking the training weights off. Any more advice for people getting ready to play it for the...
I'll use my Endure Starfist. Dude, Luber, I don't know if you were there, but Steel and I were talking. I don't know if it was on stream or off stream. I think we talked about it both on stream. Like, both of us, like, these days, just spam Endure with Starfist for every single boss when we have to play the PvE. So it's so funny how, like, all the all the good players, like, kind of default to beating the PvE, like, the exact same way.
For themselves. My advice would be take your time and don't rush it like you're on a 3-hour time limit at a preview event. Savor it. DLC for FromSoft games is always the best part, so just enjoy yourself. But yeah, I think that's about it. I've been doing my best to be relatively level-headed and sharing my preview impressions with you all. But the truth is, I'm stupidly excited. This is the Elden Ring DLC, the thing I've been anticipating for over 2 years. And yeah, FromSoft is my favorite developer, but fuck man, I think it's pretty earned. I have a bunch of critiques of Elden Ring, and as you've seen in this video, I'm not above nitpicking a preview event, but ultimately, I think FromSoft is in their own weight class with these games. I still fondly remember my first playthrough.
Yeah, he's right. For now, FromSoft is definitely in its own... I mean, it doesn't really have real competition. They need to, though. They really need to. Like, other studios need to step up and understand what Souls games are all about, which is not the case. Like, I know people like to bring up, like, Lies of P and shit like that, but let's be honest here. Do you really think Lies of P is in the same realm as Elden Ring or Lords of the Fallen? Let's be honest here. Like, of course not. You'd be fucking delusional to say so. But they do need competition.
Of Elden Ring, how magical it was.
Yeah, Lies
the
of
idea of
Min.
getting to re-experience even some of that again via this expansion makes me
It's not
so
even
happy.
close.
If you relate to that at all, I hope you have a great time with the DLC. Thanks for watching.
Alright, good vid though. Good stuff, good stuff. There's a lot of good vids. We're lucky though. I keep saying this every time there's like some sort of event. We're lucky to have like really good coverage because like you know how like we would be we would be like forced to like get our information from fucking Skill Up, from fucking like Young Ye, from GameSpot, IGN. But we're lucky enough to have like Vali, to have like Iron Pineapple, to have Oro, you know, to have these like more dedicated content creators like actually take time and understand and take, you know, just explain things properly how they should be. So again, really happy with the coverage we get from our Souls creator. All right, well guys, I think we went over almost everything. Let's watch the rest of the vid we didn't watch for Vaati.
So
And
he's
then that's going to be it after
this
that.
NPC that we saw in a previous trailer.
So we're going to finish Vaati's vid and
He
end it
didn't
there.
drop the crossbow when I defeated him, but he did drop his
120G officially over leveled. I'm 105, dude. I'm sorry. You're over leveled.
his great sword and his armor, which describes him as a knight of the solitary jail. Next, the biggest revelation in the DLC, bar none, is that the worms, I can confirm, are friendly, until they're not. If you hit them, well, you'll see. Anyway, when you first enter the DLC,
I wonder if, like, if you hit the worm, if they try to enter your butthole.
you know, which direction you set off in is such a defining moment, but I think most people will eventually find their way to these crosses of Miquella that have been left behind, partly because it's very close to the fire giant, which I think also draws your attention, but also these crosses just stand out from such a distance, and I think that is their purpose. They don't actually do anything except
And you guys act all surprised, but this is what worms do.
give you some lore. When you touch the cross, it says carved words coalesce, and the words, at most of them, said something like, I abandon here the first of the flesh of my body. Clearly, these are left behind by Miquella, and clearly his whole entourage are following these crosses as well, so you often find NPCs here. This NPC at the back there is named Freya. Basically, she used to be one of Radahn's followers, but now she follows Miquella instead, and she recommends that you talk to who she calls her dour little friend, and if you talk to him, he does give you a map of the cross's whereabouts, which is basically like a little hand-drawn map that tells you about 3 nearby crosses that are, and I quote, Miquella's footprints. So that's Freya. But the man you talk to for the map, I think, is called Hornsent, but I'm not sure if that's his name or if Hornsent are just a race of beings instead. Later, we learn that the Lion Dancer is essentially sent from the heavens, and since it has horns, I speculate that the horned race that once occupied Ballarat Tower Settlement might be called the Hornsent. The word is actually referenced as well in some items I found in the Tower Settlement. These tender items in particular seem to make it clear that the Hornsent were once a part of this society's upper echelons. But then his people were betrayed by Marika and set aflame. This explains why this Hornsent man is so upset with us, since we're a tarnished who has had Marika's grace of gold restored to them. And maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but I guess his face is actually made up of horns. I thought they were worms at first. Before you enter
That's not...
Ballarat Tower Settlement, there's a small camp off to the left.
I thought
Before
the
you
helmet looked good at first, but
actually-
the close-up actually looks pretty Elden Ring. I'm a bit disappointed now.
Made up of horns. I thought they were worms at first. Before you enter Ballarat Tower Settlement, there's a small camp off to the left here that you can't see, and it features 2 more members of Miquella's faithful followers. Their names are Ansbach and Moore, and luckily we've got pictures of them from previous trailers. Let's talk about
More looks pretty good. More looks like a lot of people are going to be wearing that armor.
Moore first. He's a bit of a gentle giant, and he sells things. Things, he says, bring joy to all. I'll list a couple of the more interesting descriptions from items he sold on screen. Notably, there was knot resin and a sealed spirit spring note. The other NPC here, and I might be butchering their name, but their name was Ansbach. He's a man who's put his fighting days behind him, and now instead he
Now he just has his hands behind his back.
dedicates himself to discerning Miquella's true purpose in the Land of Shadow. It's an important reveal because it reveals that those who follow Miquella do so out of faith. They probably can't claim to know his true motives. It seems you can progress Ansbach's questline by discovering more of Miquella's crosses, and apparently there are 6 total in this area. Curiously, Ansbach was once in service to Lord Mohg. I wonder if he abandoned Mohg at some point when he realized
If you've ever wondered like what kind of perspective you get from an egg, well, there you go.
what was being done to Miquella. And this brings up another important question, which is that I wonder, is Miquella affected by what Mohg has done to his body in the Lands Between? And we might have a bit of an answer taking shape here, because there's what looks like a sort of plant growing in the Land of Shadow called the Empyrean Blood Burgeon. It looks a lot like the sacramental buds that grow in the Lands Between. And like the sacramental buds, it has a description that seems to relate to Miquella.
And its description goes something like, you can only acquire a few per playthrough. Sorry.
Miquella's blood, and it reads, Empyrean Blood Burgeon, said to burgeon forth from where the golden blood of Miquella, the wounded Empyrean, pooled. So another of Miquella's titles is the Wounded Empyrean, and I wonder if these wounds came at the hands of Mohg. Anyway, after entering Ballarat, I looted a black firefly inside, which is a butterfly item similar to the other ones in Elden Ring, and where those butterflies are clearly referring to other demigods, this black firefly is clearly a reference to Messmer. As seen in the trailers, this tower settlement is the place that was heavily assaulted by Messmer's forces. Ash is found piled up all throughout the city, very similar to how it is in Leyndell. Clearly this place has been burned before, as you saw in the trailer. I also found some left behind Messmer Fire Grease, which is a type of weapon buff, and it explains how fire was a symbol of Messmer's crusade. Most of the enemies in the city are spirits, but there is also a red phantom who gloats about how Messmer is going to kill everyone, and he taunts us as he attacks us. But there are a few horned enemies left in the city. One of them is this enemy, which we have concept art for. It's quite small in-game, it's about the same size as your character, but unfortunately I didn't get any lore on this enemy. The other horned enemies are these horned knights, who are extremely difficult. They essentially never stop attacking, and they seem to have infinite poison.
Never stop attacking is something we deal with every single time we stream this game.
Is making them this near constant threat. So clearly there is a presence of the horned faction in this city, even after being burned by Messmer. Around this time, I checked which talismans my character was wearing, and one of them was the Outer God's Heirloom, and it references a clan who lost everything in the Great Fires. I'll let you read for yourself how intriguing this description is. These items are all hinting at a truth that we can only really guess at so early on. Another huge description was from this sorcery, which I believe you can see here in this footage, and this one seems to hint at the sorcerous origins of the fingers. Another thing you can find in Ballarat before the Lion Dancer is an old woman, who you eventually realize is a character who is speaking in the Lion Dancer cutscene, rousing the lion to life with this impassioned speech. Here's her dialogue. According to an item I found, I don't remember its name, but we learn from this item that this old woman is called the Empyrean Grandam. I think Grandam kind of means like a shaman or a grandma kind of figure, and she says that she wants to take vengeance upon Messmer and his lot. Now, the old woman doesn't talk to you after you kill the lion. She's basically depressed that you've killed her keeper. However, there is a way to get more dialogue out of her, and the guy next to me, Jeremy Ray, a journalist and a friend, he figured it out and he has the dialogue, so if you're interested, please talk to him about it because I don't quite want to spoil that yet. After I defeated the bosses at the end of both Legacy dungeons, I went back to the Round Table Hold and handed in their remembrances. The Remembrance of the Dancing Lion grants us a new Frost Stomp, Ash of War, or alternatively, you can hand it in for a charm that I think summons a sort of apparition from above you that chases enemies, though I'm not too sure about that one. After the fight with the Divine Beast, you ascend the Tower of Bellarat, and the view up here is incredible, but all you can really do here is look around because shadowy thorns block the way forward into the tower, and there's a note here that's been left behind by Needle Knight Leda, and it reads, "The gate of divinity lies in the tower sealed by shadow. This is surely where kind Miquella is headed. We are no Empyreans, but we must locate the path that will lead us there. I will follow the crosses east." This item description also potentially contains another huge revelation, as it mentions a gate of divinity in the same paragraph that also mentions Empyreans. If I had to guess, this might be the gate of divinity that represents an ascent into godhood, and that's where Leda thinks Miquella is headed, because he is an Empyrean looking to become a
Godhood is the stage in life at which you get to once you make a Reddit account.
god, you'd think. So we can't go this way, but obviously the way we have to go is east, and that's the way I went next, to Castle Ensus, the second legacy dungeon we could experience, for which I have no footage to show you. For this second legacy dungeon, I switched characters, so previously I was playing a sorcerer build that I had respec'd into a dex build that could make use of a great katana that I was wielding, and that's what I defeated the Divine Beast with. However, when I respec'd as the knight, I found my favorite weapon so far. It's called the Smith Script Hammer. It's a great hammer, but it has throwing attacks. If you do a charged R2 or a jumping R2 or a running R2, you'll spin and just yeet the entire hammer at enemies in the distance, dealing a ton of damage if you actually hit with it. It's incredible. It feels so good. I also love that they're giving special treatment to these older weapon categories and giving some of these weapons ranged attacks as well. Quality builds are going to be eating really good in this DLC, I think. This hammer carried me through all of Castle Ensus. Castle Ensus is essentially like a carrion stronghold. It's filled with moon knights and magical enemies. The entrance to it has a cross of Miquella, and at its base is another letter from Leda, proof that indeed she did come here next. How you get inside this castle is really cool. So the main gate is closed, so you have to pick a path across a waterfall to the side and infiltrate this watery secret pathway to get inside. Once you're there, there are all these teleporting nobles casting glintstone pebble at you from the rooftops as you progress through the city. It was a fantastic experience pushing through this place. It was a lot of fun. The boss of this legacy dungeon is named, and you're going to think I'm trolling, but her name is Relana. Not Renala, Relana. She's the younger sister of Renala, and she renounced her heritage to chase after Mesmer. She wields these twinned swords. She's a lot like Pontiff Sullivan from Dark Souls 3. One of her swords is imbued with black fire, and the other one is imbued with magic. I managed to beat her on my second try. The great hammer I was using was OP again, and when I handed in her remembrances, you could choose from either her twinned swords, or you could get her twin moon sorcery. I love the line of this description that says, "Here and here alone were moon and fire, ever together." It's a neat reference to the Sword of Night and Flame, which has links to the Carrions as well. So in the end, she stayed in the land of shadow.
I love how YouTube translations translates Carrion to the Karens. Yeah, it has a relationship with the Karens.
Becoming the Sword of Mesmer. All her items are fascinating, and I can't wait to learn more about her lore. In this area, I also found Rilana's Cameo, which is a new talisman that increases the damage done by stance weapons. Any weapon that requires you to enter a stance will have its damage increased. This...
Guys, just from memory, what are the stance weapons that are, like, most powerful right now? Like, yeah, there's, for PvE, like, all the stance are, like, super strong, so it's surprising that they buffed it in the first place. But, like, for PvP, like, we have Moonveil. What else is there? Unsheath, yeah. Square Off is not great. Square Off is not as strong. Ash of War for PvP. For PvE, yes, absolutely. For PvE, it is. What else is there, though? There's not that many stance, right? Is stance sweep considered a stance? Actually, that's a good question. Is like Wild Strike considered a stance, though? I think it is, but it's not really that great. But what else is there? Yeah, it's mainly Unsheath, right? Unsheath Moonveil for PvP. Chainsaw, yeah, more chainsaw damage. Piercing Fang is not a stance. Yeah, that's... Yes, yeah, Wild Strike is a stance as far as swaps go. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, alright, let's keep going.
would be great with the Milady, obviously, and there's probably a cool build you could do with the Milady where you make use of its amazing guard counter. And speaking of guard counters, another thing that will make guard counters amazing in Elden Ring is a new crystal tier for your wondrous physic flask. This new crystal tier, if I understand it right, unlocks a perfect block mechanic in Elden Ring, whereby you probably take no stamina.
Okay, like, I forgot who was talking about this earlier. I was under the impression that the physic was not unlocking the perfect block ability, but it was unlocking the perfect block 40% damage increase for, like, guard counters after perfect blocks for, like, 30 seconds. I didn't catch last time when they talked about it if it unlocked the perfect block ability altogether. But that's what VaatiVidya seems to be saying here. It's that the physic itself actually unlocked the perfect block. This is not perfect block. They just added something new. I know we have our own, like, perfect block, which is basically like some sort of, like, glitch that carried over since, like, all the way back to, like, Dark Souls 1. But I don't know. I'm trying to find out, like, what's the actual mechanic here, like the actual one in the DLC.
Block mechanic in Elden Ring, where stand it right, wondrous physic flask. This new crystal tier, if I understand it right, unlocks a perfect block mechanic in Elden Ring, whereby you probably take no stamina damage if you time your block perfectly with an enemy's attacks. You guys probably know that I'm a huge fan of Sekiro's parry system, and I always thought it was a huge missed opportunity that...
To be fair, though, this sort of thing could, like, easily shut down, like, a lot of weapons. You know, anything that's, like, fairly reactable, you don't have to roll anymore. Like, you just stay in your face and just, you know, block it, no stamina cost. Like, this one is going to be, like, tricky. We'll have to see.
That Elden Ring didn't incorporate this system in some way, but now it seems they are bringing it over with this crystal tier, at least. There were two other NPCs I met in the DLC. One was named Tholier, and he was a really demure man who had an obsession with poison. He sold the deadly poison perfume bottle as well as some other weapons besides.
I mean, they didn't think about BHS when it first came out, other than it looking cool. Oh yeah, OG. Oh yeah, dude, that's... Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, we could see a BHS 2.0 or like something else that's like in the same vein that just breaks everything for sure. Oh yeah.
The other NPC I met was named Egon, and you could hear him screaming in pain from a great distance. But even then, he was swearing revenge upon some dragon that had wronged him.
Big Hat Logan, thank you so much for the 3-month resub, man. Much appreciated.
So I put Egon out of his misery, of course, and as I did, he fought back with some Dragon Communion spells. This clued me in that he might be a Dragon Communion warrior, and a lot of the items he dropped when I killed him confirmed that. I had to do it for the lore. You guys understand. But the truly fascinating thing is that there's an invader that attacks you just up the path from Egon. And they invade you, but they don't look like a regular human invader. So it looks like we're getting a new humanoid dragon form. Every From Software game's gotta have one, it seems. As far as the lore goes, there's probably only 2 more extremely important things to discuss. I didn't fight this enemy, but I heard from someone else in the room that there was a boss called Godwin's Loyal Knight. This boss gave you its axes upon defeat, which apparently were really cool. They apparently let you teleport around while you're attacking with them. But apparently, these axes were called Death Knight's twin axes, which seems to be a pretty big hint that Godwin has knights that serve him after his death, which could imply that the Prince of Death is a force in this world even now, which is a pretty big revelation. Another thing I heard about is an item called Marika's Blessing. This is an item similar to the Divine Blessing from Dark Souls, which restores all of your HP and FP. Apparently it's an item that has a description that says something like, Marika gave this to Miquella to take on his journey. She only
America gave this to Micah to take this on his journey. You guys know Micah from Red Dead Redemption 2?
only made one of them. And this is another big revelation, because Miquella's journey to the Land of Shadow is not something that I thought would be sanctioned by Marika. It also makes me think about this item description.
Sanctioned by America. YouTube really does understand the language that Vaati is using. And what's funny is that, like, there couldn't be, like, anyone that speaks more clearly than Vaati, but yet the YouTube translation is just so funny.
Would be sanctioned by Marika. It also makes me think about this item description from the base game where Miquella says he has learned to compel affection. I wonder if he could have learned that from his mother, but I'm getting deep into speculation territory now, and I'm also getting these 2 item descriptions secondhand, so take what I've just said with a grain of salt. But that's pretty much it from me. I'm gonna leave.
So I think the important part here is that the Elden Ring DLC was sanctioned by America.
Leave you with a list of all the rest of the item descriptions that I transcribed while I was at the event, and if you're in the camp that doesn't care about spoilers, then I hope you get a lot out of these. Of course, if you're a creator who wants to use some of these item descriptions or footage from my video to make some speculation content, of course, go for it.
Thank you so much, Vaati. Much appreciated, man.
Of course, thank you for watching as well, and
thank you for your content. Like, guys, we have to give it to Vaati. Like, you know, like, yes, he's one of the bigger Souls creator, but you have to appreciate that his content value is also, like, the highest, like, out of everyone who covers this. Like, no one else really has this sort of content value that Vaati offers. So, I mean, he does it. He does it all. Gotta give it to him. Thank you, Vaati.
This will probably be my last DLC video until the game comes out, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'll see you in the next one.
All right. Well, guys, that's going to be it for us for today. We went over as much as we could. We covered a lot of things. I think it would be nice to get, like, some sort of a recap of the things that were noteworthy that we learned about. I think number 1 most important thing is 100 new weapons. Like, total in the DLC. That's huge. Second most noteworthy thing I would say is the size of the DLC itself. FromSoft said half the size of Limgrave, but we've heard half the size of the main game from Iron Pineapple, so I don't know. We'll have to see on that one. I'm a bit skeptical there, but what else was there, guys? Like, just going on top of your, on top of your head, like, what struck you in all these DLC vids that we just watched that you thought was important, good or bad? Fire Spear Ash for Colossal Swords. Yeah, the new Ash of War for Colossal Swords is really nice. Tons of annoying looking shit. I mean, that was expected though. All the ranged weapon moveset might be kind of nuts in Invasion. Yeah, we'll have to see about that, honestly. I think the best part was no multiplayer info. Perfume weapons, your thoughts? It's hard to say until we try it, for sure. But it does sound annoying in ganks. As many things are, really. So it wouldn't be like much different from what we got. The black armor is next to the spawn. I didn't remember that, but that's good to know. Like, the armors look great. Like, we got to see more stuff, got to see more armors. The armors look nice. I really like the fist weapons, not the claw weapons, but the new fist weapons that they showcased. Those are probably my favorite that I saw in the DLC weapon-wise. What else is there? Let me check. Oh yeah, we're getting new kicks. Like a kick Ash of War for these new fists. Excited for everything, even though it will be unbalanced. Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Excited, but it will be unbalanced. The perfume looks like one of the most broken thing right off the bat. Yeah, honestly, like, I know Yui said that, like, it looked pretty bad, but, I mean, you have to assume that these perfume weapons are going to scale with the perfume talisman. Like, I'm sure From Software is going to make it that way. And so, like, I don't know, man. Like, there's a lot of attacks on these perfume things. Like, and by the way, like, if you've ever used the perfume consumable in Elden Ring, like, it has a very good hitbox in the sense that it's very easy to roll catch someone with the perfume consumable. So if the actual perfume weapon works the same way, they're going to be good at roll catching as well. But we'll have to see for that one. But yeah, I'm cautious about those. Let's see. What seems good for invaders? Honestly, low-key, the Wave of Darkness gravity spells actually would be pretty good for invaders. Sorry. Also, another thing, I mean, the huge nuke pots would also be pretty good for invaders as well. The martial arts stuff, I don't think would be necessarily pretty good for invaders. On top of my head like that, I would have to, like, rewatch. Great Katana is a great katana, confirmed by Oro. Yeah. I really love From Software embracing all these range options. I really love From Software embracing all these range options. I really love From Software embracing all these range options. Hopefully good PvE can distract from the inevitable broken shit for a little while. Yeah. About the new weapon shown, what is your thoughts on them? Do you think they'll break the meta, will be broken like Moonveil, or will they be trash? I'm gonna be dead honest. A lot of it looks like it could potentially be problematic, but it's honestly a bit hard to say until you actually get to try it. Like, a lot of this stuff that seems broken could be like easily strafable. Could have like very low damage. Like this sort of stuff, like I'm gonna need to get my hands on it to give you like a proper idea as to like what we should be expecting. Like as much as I like, you know, I can like see like a weapon and tell if it's good or bad. Like these weapons, their moveset is so damn all over the place. And like even the light greatsword weapon, like the light greatsword was probably the most standard weapon we've seen in that entire like the entire day throughout all these videos and trailers and whatnot. Like that was the most basic weapon we've seen, and it was hard to tell which attack, like when an attack was actually starting and when it was the start of another attack. Like all these attacks were chaining together so smoothly that it looked like one attack did like 4 swings, you know what I mean? So it's hard to tell like if something is good or bad, or bad if you can't even distinguish when the first attack starts and when the next attack starts. When it's just like a flurry of attacks that keep continuing, like it's hard to tell like how do you judge like when the attack starts and when it finishes? Like what's the recovery there if you don't know when it starts and finish, you know? Oh yeah, storm talismans. Oh yeah, the storm talismans for me is probably the worst news of this entire presentation. I'm gonna be honest. Like the storm talisman is like such a big L, because there's actually no storm attack in the entire game that deserves that. Like legitimately, as it is right now, the storm ashes of war are probably the strongest ash of, like if you had to pick like one class of like ash of war for like everything, the storm ashes of war are probably the strongest in the game. Like why would you give a bonus to these when they're already like the best? It doesn't make sense. So that was a huge L for me. Like this, like 15% extra damage for Storm Ash of War is like crazy to me. It's ridiculous. Like imagine Storm Assault, like another 15% extra damage on Storm Assault. You guys, I don't know if you were there when we did like a proper like strength build with like 70 strength. Like we could get our Storm Assault to do 1,000 damage. 1,000 damage for a Storm Assault. Just add another like 150 to that, you know? Like just for good measure. Crazy, man. What else is there? So Heavy Pot will be like pocket IMA explosion. That's actually a good way to look at it, and I'm all for it. I think the nuke pots, the big pots, they were confirmed to be craftable consumables, which I really appreciate. I will love to use them. These will be a great tool for invaders, 100%. I bet too, like they're probably gonna do like massive damage with the talisman and the pot helmet too. Also, since I'm reading your comments, let's actually have some background footage that plays while we check this. While I read your comments. FromSoft didn't invite Chasethebro. No PvPers. That says something about them. I don't know why though. Like one thing I never really understood, Chase never really got invited to like any of these events. I don't know if it's, I mean, I don't think it's Chase that just doesn't want to go there, but I find it weird because, like, you know, not inviting, like, you know, someone like me, like, I totally understand, like, they wouldn't want, like, someone, like, that's as critical, but, like, Chase is as advertisement friendly and, like, you know, as good for your brand as they come. So I never really understood why they didn't bring in Chase. I don't know. Let's see what else. All my homies hate Storm Stomp. Wait. Mongus, is that right? Storm Assault on a dedicated quality build does like 1,500 with Alexander Shard on the right weapon? Are you fucking serious? Are you serious, Mungus? Bro, are we gonna get into the era where you just reaction trade with Storm Assault and just one-shot people, like, instead of rolling? You just wait for them to do anything and you just reaction trade Storm Assault for for like 1,700 or something stupid like that? Fuck me, man. What build are you going to go with? I've made a well, I think we played with it on stream. It was the build where we level up through invasion a while ago. So that's what we're gonna bring to the DLC first. Let's see. Everyone's talking about the storm things. Keep in mind the DLC will probably launch with a patch like the other DLCs, so Storm Ashes might not even be as good. Hopefully, dude. I hope you're right. I really hope you are right with that. If that is the case, you know, if they actually nerf all these Storm Ashes of War and they give it you know, a talisman to boost them back up a little bit because they have nerfed them, I will be okay with that. So seeing the positive, maybe that's why they introduced this talisman in the first place. They were like, you know what, let's nerf them, but let's not like get everyone like disappointed about them. Let's boost them in some other capacity. That would be really happy with that, actually. That's a good point. Let's see what else. I'm probably very late with chat. No, I'm not actually caught up. Alright, well, I think we pretty much went over most things that you guys wanted to talk about. So yeah, this weapon there though, like I really like this the new fist class. Really like it. I'm excited to try that out. Looks really cool. All right, guys. Thank you everyone for coming by the stream. I hope you guys enjoyed this this quick reaction, you know, just watching all of this stuff together, watching what our content creators had cooking for us. It was entertaining. I'm eager to try the DLC, honestly. Like there's so much stuff that I want to know more about. Like especially like when it comes to like the weapons and the spells and all that stuff. When it comes to the environment, there's really nothing that, like as far as the environments are concerned, or as far as the armors are concerned, and like the new areas and all that stuff, like it all looks great. Like I'm just happy and excited to play in all these new areas. I think my only worry comes from the PvP perspective for like the weapon balance, really. That's the only thing that I'm a bit iffy about. Holy shit, Seiji! Thank you so much for the 20 gifted subs, man. Holy shit, dude. Thank you so much, Seiji. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, man. God damn it. Thank you, Seiji. So yeah, all in all, guys, I hope you guys are excited for that DLC. We're gonna find out soon enough. Like, shit, dude, we're already in June, man. Time really does fly. We're already in June. Guys, does the DLC come out? What's the exact date for the DLC to come out? Is it like is it the 22nd or 21st? I forgot. What's the DLC date? Is it 21st? June 21st. Okay. So it's Friday. Oh, or technically, yeah, if it's at midnight, it's going to be like Saturday. God damn, that's soon, man. So basically, the DLC comes out in like about 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, we're gonna get the, or a bit less than 3 weeks, we're gonna get the DLC. All right. It's mid Friday night for us. Oh, okay. 9 p.m. for West Coast gang. Damn, West Coast being lucky. Harmony, thanks for the raid. Although I am about to end, but thank you very much. It's 11:59 for us. All right, thanks Steve. Yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for today. Honestly, it was nice. I'm very grateful that we have such good, like, homebred content creators for this game, for covering this, so we're not stuck with like the IGN and GameStop and all that stuff. Like, we do really have good specific coverage from our guys that cover Souls, so we should really appreciate it. All right, guys, thank you everyone for watching again. Really appreciate it. Let's see who's streaming. We're gonna rate someone that's playing Elden Ring. So let's see here who's online. Okay, so we have Saintriot, we have Enda, we have Frosty. Oh, guys, I'm gonna leave you with Frosty. He's gonna fucking jubilate about the DLC. Like, if you guys want something positive, like, Frosty is gonna get you hyped like crazy. Let me send you over to Frosty, man. Like, Frosty is probably the most positive person that you can find for the DLC. He's so excited. So I'll send you over to Frosty. He's gonna get you guys excited as well. Take care, guys.